My wife's dad announced on New Year's Eve, "We're going to replace you with someone else. You're too old to be useful." I packed my bags and decided to vanish. At the bus station, I couldn't stop thinking. After 13 years at his company, a young woman asked if I was okay, so I told her everything. She made a phone call and said, "Dad, I found him." "Yes, I'm sure." The champagne flutes caught the light like tiny prisons of gold. I remember that detail with painful clarity, the way each glass reflected the chandelier in my father-in-law's dining room, how the bubbles rose in perfect, disciplined lines. How everything about that New Year's Eve dinner felt choreographed for maximum impact. If you've ever sat at a table where you suddenly realized you were the only one who didn't know the script, you'll understand the particular kind of cold that settled into my bones that night. Richard Chen sat at the head of the table, as he always did. 72 years old, silver hair swept back like a corporate Caesar, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. My wife Sarah sat to his right, her mother Margaret to his left. I sat next to Sarah, our hands separate on the white tablecloth, not touching. We hadn't touched much in months, but I'd convinced myself it was just stress. Work stress, life stress. The kind of stress that 13 years of grinding yourself into dust for a family business creates. 13 years. I rolled that number around in my mind while Richard's housekeeper Maria, who'd always been kind to me, served the first course. 13 years since I'd married, Sarah and Richard had offered me a position at Chen Industries. "Start at the bottom," he'd said, gripping my shoulder at our wedding reception. "Prove yourself. That's how real men build empires." So I proved myself. I started in logistics, worked weekends, took the assignments no one else wanted. I learned Mandarin to communicate better with our suppliers in Shenzhen. I spent 3 years in procurement, building relationships that saved the company millions. Then operations, then project management, then senior operations director. I'd missed birthdays, anniversaries, my own father's funeral because of a crisis in the Singapore office that only I could handle. "You wanted proof," Richard had said during my last promotion review 6 months ago. "You've given it." But tonight, the way he looked at me across that table like I was a balance sheet entry he was considering writing off, made my stomach clench. "I want to make a toast," Richard announced, standing. The room fell silent, except for the soft clink of his ring against crystal as he lifted his glass. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Chicago sprawled beneath us. 40 stories of winter night and city lights that felt suddenly very far away. I lifted my glass. Sarah lifted hers. Margaret smiled, that smile she'd perfected over decades of corporate dinners, the one that revealed nothing and promised even less. "To 2024, Richard began. "A year of necessary changes." My hand tightened on the stem of my glass. Something in his tone. "Chen Industries has been in my family for 48 years, he continued. "I built it from a small import business into a multinational corporation. But I'm not a young man anymore. It's time to think about succession, about legacy, about who will carry this company into the future." This was it, I thought. This was the moment. After 13 years of proving myself, of sacrificing everything, of becoming the son he never had, this was when he would announce that I was being made CEO, that all of it had meant something. "I've made a decision," Richard said, and his eyes met mine. The moment stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat. Sarah's perfume, something floral and expensive, seemed suddenly cloying. "We're going to replace you with someone else." The words landed like a physical blow. I actually felt my body jolt backward in the chair. "You're too old to be useful." I must have misheard. The champagne bubbles kept rising in my glass, steady and indifferent. Maria had frozen in the doorway to the kitchen. Margaret's smile hadn't changed at all. What?" My voice came out strangled. "You're 39 years old," Richard said, sitting back down with the casual grace of a man who'd just commented on the weather. "In tech years, In innovation years, that's ancient. The industry is moving toward AI, toward automation, toward thinking that requires a mindset you simply don't have anymore. You're set in your ways. You think like someone from the old guard. I brought our operations into the 21st century, I said, and I hated how defensive I sounded. The automated inventory systems, the blockchain supply chain tracking. Following trends isn't the same as setting them, Richard interrupted. I need someone who doesn't just implement innovation. I need someone who embodies it. Someone hungry. Someone who hasn't spent 13 years getting comfortable. Sarah still hadn't said anything. I turned to look at her, searching her face for surprise, for anger, for any sign that she was hearing this for the first time. She was studying her champagne. Sarah, I said, just her name, a question and a plea. She finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something worse than anger or shock. I saw relief. We talked about this, she said softly. Dad and I. We've been talking about it for months. The room tilted. Or maybe I tilted. It was hard to tell. Months, I repeated. You're not happy, Sarah said, and she actually sounded like she believed it. You come home exhausted every night. You're stressed all the time. This isn't good for you. It isn't good for us. So you decided to fire me without even... We're not firing you, Richard said, his voice taking on that patient, explaining to a child tone I'd heard him use with incompetent vendors. We're offering you a very generous severance package. 6 months salary, full benefits for a year, a glowing recommendation. You can take some time, figure out what you really want to do with your life. What I really wanted to do. As if the last 13 years had been some sort of hobby I'd been indulging. Who? I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. Who's replacing me? Richard and Sarah exchanged a glance. It was brief, but I caught it the kind of look that said they'd rehearsed this part too. Brandon Mitchell, Richard said. Mitt grad, 27 years old. He's been consulting for us for the past 6 months. Brilliant mind. He's already identified 3 major inefficiencies in our operations that we're implementing next quarter. 6 months. The same 6 months Sarah had apparently been discussing my obsolescence with her father. Those inefficiencies, I said slowly. Are they in the confidential operational review I submitted in July? The one I'd spent 2 months compiling. The one I'd worked on during our anniversary trip to Napa, typing on my laptop while Sarah slept. The one I'd personally presented to Richard, thinking it would secure my position as his heir apparent. Richard's expression didn't change. Brandon came to similar conclusions independently. I'm sure he did. The sarcasm hung in the air like smoke. Margaret delicately cut into her appetizer scallops, in some sort of foam that probably had a French name I couldn't pronounce. Maria had disappeared back into the kitchen, probably grateful to escape the carnage. You're taking this personally, Richard said. It's business. You of all people should understand that. Business, I echoed. Right. Silly me, taking my career personally. Taking my marriage personally. Sarah flinched. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it came out harsh enough that even Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. Tell me, when exactly were you planning to mention this? Before or after the ball dropped at midnight? Was this going to be your New Year's resolution? Get rid of dead-weight husband? You're being dramatic, Margaret said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was cool, modulated, absolutely certain. Richard is offering you an opportunity, a chance to start fresh. Most people would be grateful. Most people. As if I was just another employee, not the man who'd spent 13 years building her son-in-law's dreams into her family's reality. I looked at Sarah again. Really looked at her. The woman I'd fallen in love with in grad school, when she was writing poetry and talking about opening a bookstore. Before her father had convinced her to get an MBA. Before she'd become this polished, corporate version of herself, who could sit at a table and watch her husband be dismantled with the same expression she used reviewing quarterly earnings. "Say something," I told her. "Say anything." She set down her champagne flute with a soft clink. "I think it's for the best." 7 words. That's all it took. I pushed my chair back. The sound was too loud in the elegant room, a violence of wood against marble. "I need some air." "We haven't finished dinner," Margaret said, as if that mattered, as if anything about this farce of a meal mattered. "I think I'm done." I walked out, down the hallway with its abstract art that cost more than most people's houses, past the home office where I'd spent countless evenings helping Richard review contracts, being mentored, being groomed for a position I now understood I was never going to get, into the marble-floored foyer where my coat hung on a hook that probably cost more than my first month's rent. The elevator ride down felt like falling. 40 floors of descent, of gravity pulling me away from everything I'd built, everything I'd believed. The doorman, James, who always asked about my day, opened the door with his usual professional smile. "Happy New Year, Mr. Peterson." "Yeah," I said. "Happy New Year." The Chicago wind hit me like a slap. December 31st, 11:47 p.m., according to the clock in the lobby. 13 minutes until a new year. 13 minutes until everyone around me started celebrating fresh starts and new beginnings, while I stood on Michigan Avenue trying to figure out how my entire life had been deleted like a spam email. I started walking. No destination, just movement. Past the luxury stores closed for the holiday, past the late-night restaurants where people who still had something to celebrate were finishing their prix-fixé dinners. Past the couple taking selfies in front of their reflection in a darkened window, kissing for the camera, for posterity, for proof that they were happy. My phone buzzed. "Sarah, where are you?" I stared at the message. 3 words. Not "I'm sorry," not "let's talk," not "I should have told you." Just a logistical question. Probably asked because Margaret was concerned about appearances. I turned my phone off. The truth was settling into my bones now, cold and certain as the winter wind. This hadn't been a sudden decision. This had been months in the making. While I'd been working 70-hour weeks, Sarah had been planning my exit. While I'd been learning Mandarin and missing my father's funeral and sacrificing every piece of myself I'd valued, they'd been grooming my replacement. Brandon Mitchell, 27, MIT, probably thought digital transformation was a personality trait. I found myself at the bus station without really meaning to. The Greyhound terminal at Harrison Street, a place I hadn't thought about in years, not since before I'd married into the Chen family and their private cars and their drivers and their world where people like me didn't take public buses. It was almost empty. A few people scattered across the hard plastic seats, their belongings bunched around them like barricades. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, that particular frequency that sounds like depression feels. The departure board flickered. Street Louis, Memphis, Indianapolis, Detroit. Cities that weren't Chicago. Places where no one knew who the Chen family was. I bought a ticket. Didn't even look at where it was going. Just pointed at the next departure and handed over my credit card. "Seat 15A, the clerk said. "Boards in 20 minutes. I sat down on one of those plastic chairs, my overnight bag at my feet. I'd grabbed it from the car without thinking. The go bag I'd kept for business emergencies. Inside, 2 days of clothes, toiletries, my passport, my laptop, everything I needed to disappear into a hotel in Singapore or Shanghai or Stuttgart. Or, apparently, Indianapolis. The PA system crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now 5 minutes to midnight Eastern Standard Time." Around me, the scattered passengers were pulling out their phones, probably to text loved ones, to make their New Year's calls, to pretend that the arbitrary rotation of a planet around a star meant something about fresh starts and second chances. My phone was still off. Somewhere in a penthouse, 40 stories above Michigan Avenue, my wife was probably pouring another glass of champagne. My father-in-law was probably toasting to necessary changes, and my replacement was probably being celebrated for his youth, his hunger, his MIT pedigree. 13 years. I'd given 13 years. And now I was sitting in a bus station at midnight on New Year's Eve, holding a ticket to nowhere, trying to figure out how I'd become so old and useless at 39. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives in champagne flutes and measured voices, in rehearsed explanations, and the relief in your wife's eyes when she finally gets to stop pretending. It arrives in the words, "You're too old to be useful," delivered by a man you called a mentor, served alongside scallops in foam. I wanted to feel angry. I wanted to feel the kind of rage that drives revenge plots and dramatic confrontations. But all I felt was tired, bone deep, soul-crushing tired. "Excuse me?" I looked up. A young woman stood in front of me, mid-20s maybe, wearing jeans and a Northwestern sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had the kind of face that suggested intelligence, sharp eyes, focused expression, like she was always calculating 3 steps ahead. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, "but are you okay? You look like you're about to vanish into the floor." I almost laughed. That's actually the plan. She tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that would have been uncomfortable if I'd had any capacity left for discomfort. Vanishing rarely solves anything. Trust me, I've tried. Yeah, well, sometimes there's nothing left to solve. Sometimes you're just done. Done with what? And maybe it was because she was a stranger. Maybe it was because I was sitting in a bus station holding a ticket to Indianapolis at midnight on New Year's Eve. Maybe it was because I literally had nothing left to lose. So I told her. I told her everything. 13 years at Chen Industries, working my way up from nothing. The Mandarin lessons, the missed funerals, the Singapore crisis, the operational review that took 2 months to compile, Richard's announcement, Sarah's relief, Brandon Mitchell and his MIT pedigree, the champagne flutes like little prisons of gold. She listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from polite interest to something sharper, more focused. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. She held up one finger, wait, and put the phone to her ear. "Dad," she said into the phone. "I found him. Yes, I'm sure." She paused, listening, her eyes still on me. "Greyhound Terminal, Harrison Street. No, he's about to get on a bus to Indianapolis." Another pause. "Dad, I'm looking right at him. It's definitely him." My entire body went cold. "Who are you?" I asked. She lowered the phone, but didn't hang up. When she smiled, it wasn't unkind, but it wasn't exactly warm either. "My name is Nicole," she said. "Nicole Chen." The world stopped. "And I think," she continued, "we need to talk about my father." Nicole Chen. The name hung in the air between us, like a grenade, with the pin pulled. Outside the bus terminal, fireworks started exploding over the Chicago skyline. Someone's premature celebration, or maybe right on time. Midnight had arrived, while I'd been spilling my guts to a stranger who apparently wasn't a stranger at all. "I don't understand," I said, though that felt like the understatement of the century. My brain was doing that thing where it tries to process information that doesn't fit into any existing framework. Richard Chen had one daughter, Sarah, my wife, the woman who just sat across from me and watched her father carve up my career like it was the main course. Nicole was still holding her phone, still watching me with those calculating eyes. Up close, I could see hints of Richard in her features, the sharp cheekbones, the way she held herself with absolute certainty. But where Richard's face had been carved by decades of ruthless business decisions, hers still had softness around the edges. Youth, maybe. Or maybe just a different kind of hardness. "Let me guess," she said, sliding into the plastic chair next to mine. "Richard never mentioned having another daughter." "No. I mean, there's Sarah. Just Sarah." "Just Sarah," Nicole repeated, and something dark flickered across her face. "Right. The legitimate one. The heir. The one who gets to sit at the table while men like you get fed to the wolves." Her phone was still in her hand. I could hear a tinny voice coming from the speaker. Someone talking, asking questions. "Who's on the phone?" I asked. "My father," Nicole said. Then, seeing my expression, "My real father, not Richard. Though that's a complicated story, and we don't have a lot of time. Your bus to Indianapolis boards in 15 minutes. "I'm not getting on that bus." "No," she agreed. "You're not. You're going to come with me, and you're going to listen to what I have to say. And then you're going to decide whether you want to disappear to Indianapolis and spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been, or whether you want to do something about what just happened to you." The fireworks kept exploding. Through the grimy windows of the terminal, I could see bursts of gold and silver against the dark sky. People celebrating. People kissing their partners and making toasts, and believing that arbitrary numbers on a calendar meant something about hope and renewal. "Why should I trust you?" I asked. Nicole smiled, and it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "Because I'm the proof that Richard Chen isn't the man you thought he was." "Because I've been where you are, thrown away, replaced, told I wasn't good enough. And because I've spent the last 8 years collecting receipts." Receipts. The word made something click in my mind. A piece of the puzzle sliding into place, even though I couldn't see the full picture yet. 8 years, I said slowly. "You've been investigating Richard for 8 years?" "Investigating, documenting, waiting for the right moment. You know what they say about revenge? It's a dish best served cold. Well, it's January in Chicago. Doesn't get much colder than this." She raised the phone back to her ear. "Dad?" "Yeah, he's listening. We're at the terminal." Okay, I will." She hung up and stood, extending her hand to me. "Come on, there's a car outside. We'll explain everything, but not here." "Not in a place where Richard probably has a dozen cameras and at least one person on his payroll." I looked at her outstretched hand. This was insane. I didn't know this woman. She'd appeared out of nowhere, claimed to be Richard's daughter, and now wanted me to get into a car with her and someone she called her real father. Every instinct I had that hadn't been obliterated by the last 2 hours of my life screamed that this was a trap. But then again, what did I have to lose? I took her hand. She pulled me up with surprising strength for someone who probably weighed 120 pounds soaking wet. "Leave the bus ticket," she said. "You won't need it." Outside, the cold hit me like a physical force. The fireworks had stopped, but I could still hear celebrations in the distance, bars and parties and people who hadn't just had their entire existence restructured without their consent. A black Mercedes was idling at the curb, exhaust pluming in the winter air. Nicole opened the back door and gestured for me to get in. I hesitated for just a moment. Last chance to run, to get on that bus to Indianapolis, to vanish into a life of normalcy and defeat. Then I got in the car. The interior was warm and smelled like leather and expensive cologne. A man sat in the driver's seat, older than me, maybe mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen things that kept him up at night. He turned to look at me, and his eyes did something unexpected. They filled with tears. "Daniel Peterson," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My God, you look just like your father." I froze. "How do you? Who are you?" "Thomas Barrett," he said, extending a hand back toward me. I served with your father in the Marines. Camp Pendleton, 1995 to 1999. He saved my life in Kosovo. And I've been looking for you for 3 years. The world tilted again. Twice in one night, some kind of record. My father never talked about the Marines, I said. He died when you were 26. Thomas finished. I know. I was at the funeral. In the back. You probably didn't notice me. There were a lot of people there. Your father was a good man. The best man I ever knew. Nicole slid into the seat next to me and pulled the door shut. Drive, Dad, before someone notices we're here. Thomas put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. We drove in silence for a few blocks, heading north on Michigan Avenue, past the Art Institute and Millennium Park, and all the landmarks I'd passed 1,000 times during my 13 years in this city. I don't understand what's happening, I said finally. Any of it. I know, Thomas said, and I'm sorry. I know this must be overwhelming, but Nicole's right. We don't have a lot of time. Richard Chen is a dangerous man, and now that he's made his move against you, things are going to happen fast. Dangerous how? Nicole pulled out a tablet from her bag and handed it to me. The screen showed a photograph, black and white, grainy, the kind of image you see in old newspaper archives. It showed 2 men standing in front of what looked like a warehouse. One of them was clearly a younger Richard Chen, maybe in his 30s. The other was a man I didn't recognize, stocky and hard-faced. That photo was taken in 1996. Nicole said, "The man standing next to Richard is Viktor Kozlov, Russian mob. He was murdered 6 weeks after this photo was taken, shot 3 times in the back of the head, execution style. The police never found his killer." I looked up from the tablet. You're saying, Richard? I'm saying Richard Chen built his empire on a foundation of blood and corruption. I'm saying he's not a legitimate businessman who made smart investments. I'm saying he's a criminal who got very, very good at hiding his crimes behind corporate structures and political donations and a respectable family image. She swiped to the next image. This one showed a ledger, handwritten entries in columns, numbers that looked like millions. Money laundering, she said. This ledger was part of an FBI investigation that got shut down in 1998. Guess who made substantial donations to certain political campaigns right before the investigation was closed? Another swipe. A photo of Richard with a man in a suit, both of them smiling at what looked like a charity gala. Senator James Morrison, Nicole said, committed suicide in 2003. Left a note about his sins and the deals he couldn't live with anymore. His family said he'd been acting paranoid for weeks before his death, talking about how he'd made mistakes he couldn't undo. Swipe, swipe, swipe. Each image was another piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. Financial documents, photos, news clippings. A woman's obituary. Died suddenly at age 34. Survived by her daughter Nicole. I stopped at that one. This is your mother? Nicole's face was carved from stone. Lily Barrett. She worked as Richard's personal assistant from 1997 to 1999. They had an affair. She got pregnant. Richard promised to leave Margaret, to do the right thing. Instead, he gave her $1 million and told her to disappear, to never tell anyone he was the father. She took the money because she was 25 years old and scared and alone. But she told you. She told me everything. And then, when I was 16, she died. The official cause was a heart attack. Sudden cardiac arrest. Tragic, they said. So young. But you don't think it was natural? I think my mother started asking Richard for more money. I think she threatened to go public, to tell Margaret, to ruin his perfect family image. And I think 3 weeks later she was dead. Nicole's voice was flat, affect-less, the kind of tone people use when they're talking about pain so deep that showing it would shatter them completely. I can't prove it. That's the thing about Richard. He's very good at making things look natural, making problems disappear. Thomas had been driving while Nicole talked, and I realized we were heading out of the city now, onto the highway, going somewhere I didn't know. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere safe," Thomas said. "Somewhere we can talk without worrying about who's listening." Nicole came to me 3 years ago with everything she'd found about Richard. We've been building a case ever since. "A case for what?" "If you can't prove he killed your mother, we can prove other things," Nicole said. She swiped to another document on the tablet. "Tax evasion, securities fraud, bribing federal officials, RICO violations. We have 8 years of documentation, Daniel. 8 years of following paper trails and interviewing witnesses and connecting dots that everyone else missed because they were too dazzled by Richard Chen's success story." I stared at the tablet, at the evidence spread across its screen like a map to hell. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tonight? Why me?" Nicole and Thomas exchanged a glance in the rearview mirror. "Because you were the last piece," Thomas said quietly. "The one we've been waiting for." "I don't understand." "Your operational review," Nicole said. "The one you submitted to Richard 6 months ago. The one that identified inefficiencies and recommended restructuring. Do you remember what kind of access you needed to compile that report?" I thought back. Everything. Full access to all operational databases, financial systems, supplier contracts. Exactly. You had keys to every door in Chen Industries. And you documented everything, didn't you? Because that's the kind of thorough, detail-oriented person you are. The kind of person who keeps receipts. The phrase again. Receipts. "I don't have my report anymore," I said. "It's on the company servers. This," and quote, "with Aramonder, with 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 Aramonder." "But you backed it up," Nicole said. "It wasn't a question. Because you're careful. Because you knew it represented 2 months of work. You backed it up to your personal drive, didn't you?" I had. Of course I had. The backup was on my laptop, in my overnight bag, sitting at my feet in this car racing through the Chicago suburbs toward God knew where. "What's in my report that you need?" I asked. Though I was starting to suspect, I knew the answer. "Everything," Nicole said. "You documented supplier relationships that were actually fronts for money laundering. You tracked financial flows that expose fraud. You mapped organizational structures that connect Richard to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. You didn't know what you were seeing. You thought you were just identifying operational inefficiencies. But you built us a roadmap, straight to Richard's criminal empire." The car took an exit. We were somewhere in the northern suburbs now, the landscape shifting from city to something more residential, more spread out. Snow had started to fall, light flakes that caught in the headlights like tiny falling stars. "Brandon Mitchell," I said slowly. "The 27-year-old, who's replacing me." "Doesn't exist," Nicole said. "Or rather, he exists, but he's not who Richard claims. He's a consultant, yes, but not for improving operations. He's there to scrub the evidence, to rewrite systems, and restructure databases, and make sure that all the documentation you created, all the proof of Richard's crimes, disappears. And getting rid of me was necessary because you know too much, because you're the only person who understands those systems well enough to testify about them. Because you're the loose end Richard needs to tie off before his house of cards comes down." I sat back in the seat, my mind racing. 13 years. 13 years I'd spent building a career at Chen Industries, thinking I was proving myself, earning respect, becoming family. And all along, I'd been documenting evidence of crimes I didn't even know were happening. "You're too old to be useful," I said quietly. That's what he said. "He meant you were too dangerous to keep around," Thomas said. Now that he's got someone in place to erase the evidence, he needs you gone. Discredited, ideally. Hence the humiliating dinner dismissal. Hence making sure your wife was on board with destroying you. Hence the generous severance package that would have kept you quiet and grateful while they deleted everything you'd built. Sarah. God, Sarah. Had she known? Had she understood what her father really was? Did my wife know? I asked. About any of this? Nicole shook her head. I don't think so. I think Sarah's just like everyone else. Richard controls. She sees what he wants her to see. Devoted father, successful businessman, family man. Richard's greatest skill isn't making money or building companies. It's making people believe in a version of him that doesn't exist. The car pulled off the highway onto a smaller road, then into the driveway of what looked like a farmhouse, isolated and dark except for a single light burning in a window. Thomas parked and turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. "Here's what happens now," he said, turning in his seat to face me fully. "You have a choice. You can walk away. We'll drive you back to Chicago. You can get on a bus to Indianapolis or anywhere else, and you can start over. The severance package Richard offered is real. You'll land on your feet eventually. You're smart, capable, experienced. You'll rebuild. Or, I asked, though I already knew. Or you help us bring him down," Nicole said. "You give us access to your operational review, to everything you documented. You testify when the time comes. You stop being the victim of Richard Chen's story and start being the weapon that destroys it." Through the window, I could see snow accumulating on the hood of the car, covering the black paint with white, transforming it into something new. "If I do this," I said, "what happens to Sarah?" "We can't protect her from the truth," Nicole said quietly. "When Richard falls, the whole empire falls. Sarah's trust fund, her lifestyle, her belief in her father, all of it goes. That's collateral damage we can't avoid. She'll hate me. She already chose her father over you," Nicole pointed out. "She made that choice tonight, at that dinner table. The question is, what choice are you going to make?" I looked at the farmhouse, at the light burning in the window. Inside, I imagined, there were files and documents, and 8 years of patient, methodical investigation. 8 years of a daughter trying to get justice for her mother. 8 years of a Marine keeping a promise to a fallen brother. And now they were asking me, Daniel Peterson, 39 years old, too old to be useful, about to vanish to Indianapolis to be the final piece of their puzzle. I thought about Richard's face across that dinner table, the casual cruelty in his voice, the way he delivered my professional execution like he was commenting on the weather. I thought about Sarah's relief, the look in her eyes that said she'd been waiting for this, planning for this, maybe even hoping for this. I thought about 13 years of my life spent building someone else's empire, thinking it was mine too. "I want to see everything," I said. "Every piece of evidence you have, every document, every photo, every connection. I want to understand exactly what I'm getting into." Nicole smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her, and it transformed her face from calculating to something almost gentle. "Welcome to the war," she said. Thomas got out of the car and opened my door. The cold air rushed in, carrying snow and the scent of pine trees and the distant sound of more fireworks. Someone still celebrating, somewhere far away. I grabbed my overnight bag and stepped out into the new year. It was 1:47 a.m. on January 1st, 2024. In 13 hours, Richard Chen would wake up expecting me to be broken, grateful, gone. He had no idea what was coming. The farmhouse smelled like coffee and old wood, and something else I couldn't quite place. Maybe determination, if determination had a scent. Pine, with an undertone of obsession. Thomas led me through a mudroom cluttered with boots and winter coats, down a hallway lined with photographs I didn't have time to study, and into what might have once been a dining room. Now it looked like something between a detective's evidence board and a war room. 3 folding tables formed a U shape, covered in file folders, laptops, and what appeared to be a timeline stretching across an entire wall. Red string connecting photographs and documents, like a spider's web of corruption. Jesus, I breathed. 8 years, Nicole said behind me, closing the door. This is 8 years of my life on these tables. Every connection, every transaction, every dirty deal. Welcome to the real Richard Chen. I set my overnight bag down and just stared. The timeline started in 1994, before I'd even graduated high school. Richard Chen, younger, harder, hungrier, standing next to men in expensive suits who looked like they'd kill you for pocket change. The timeline stretched all the way to last month, ending with a photograph of me taken from across a street. I was leaving the Chen Industries building, looking exhausted, my tie loosened, carrying my laptop bag. "You've been watching me," I said. "You've been watching me." "Waiting for you," Nicole corrected, hoping Richard would make a mistake. And he did. He got comfortable. He brought you in too close, gave you too much access, and then he panicked when he realized what you documented. Thomas moved to one of the laptops and pulled up a chair. "Coffee? This is going to take a while. Please." He disappeared into what I assumed was the kitchen. Nicole moved to the timeline wall, running her finger along the red string like she was reading Braille. "I'll start at the beginning," she said. 1994. Richard Chen is 32 years old, running a failing import business out of a warehouse in Oakland. He's drowning in debt, about to lose everything. Then he meets Viktor Kozlov. She tapped the photo of Richard and the stocky Russian man. Kozlov was mid-level Russian mob. Not a boss, but connected. He had a problem, lots of dirty money, not enough ways to clean it. Richard had a solution, a legitimate import business with connections in China. They made a deal. Kozlov funneled money through Chen Imports, disguised as payments for goods that were either overpriced or didn't exist. Richard took a 30% cut. "Money laundering," I said. "Classic scheme. Would have worked forever, except Kozlov got greedy. Started using Richard's company to import more than just fake invoices. Drugs, weapons, contraband. Richard didn't sign up for that. So in 1996, Kozlov had an unfortunate accident. Richard killed him. Can't prove it," Nicole said, and her voice had that flat quality again. The police investigated. They found nothing linking Richard to the murder. But 2 weeks after Kozlov died, Richard paid off all his business debts. 1 month later, he married Margaret Whitmore, whose father just happened to be a federal judge. 6 months after that, Chen Imports became Chen Industries and started expanding into legitimate operations. Thomas returned with coffee in 3 mismatched mugs. I took mine gratefully, letting the heat seep into my hands. The farmhouse was warm, but I felt cold from the inside out. "Here's the thing about Richard," Nicole continued. "He's smart. Not just business smart, criminal smart. He understood that the best way to hide dirty money is to bury it in a mountain of clean money. So he used Kozlov's cash to build a real empire. Real products, real customers, real profits. But underneath, there's always been a river of illegal money flowing through the company. Always." She moved along the timeline, pointing to different markers. 1998 FBI investigation into Russian mob activity in California. The case gets shut down after Senator Morrison intervenes. Senator Morrison, who received $250,000 in campaign donations from Richard's newly formed Political Action Committee. 2003, Senator Morrison dies. His suicide note mentions deals and sins. His daughter tried to get the FBI to investigate his death. They declined. The daughter? She died in a car accident in 2007. Single car collision. She was 28 years old. 2005, Richard expands into government contracting, Defense Department contracts, specifically. He bids low, delivers acceptable products, builds relationships. But here's what's interesting. She pulled out a file folder and handed it to me. Inside were procurement documents, contract awards, delivery schedules. These contracts are never quite profitable enough to justify the effort Richard puts into maintaining them, unless they're serving another purpose, which they are. We come day, we come to main just, we complete dark. I scanned the documents. What purpose? Access, Thomas said. Richard doesn't care about making money on defense contracts. He cares about the clearances, the connections, the ability to move goods through military logistics networks without scrutiny. You ship enough legal cargo through military channels. Nobody looks too closely when you slip something illegal into the manifest. Nicole pulled up a laptop and turned it to face me. On the screen was a shipping manifest from 2019. This shipment was supposed to be electronics components for a defense contractor in Virginia. But if you cross-reference the weights and volumes, she pulled up another document. The numbers don't match. There's an extra 200 kilograms that aren't accounted for in the itemized list. What was it? We don't know. That's the frustrating part. Richard's system is designed with plausible deniability at every level. The shipping manager doesn't know what's in the containers. The warehouse supervisor doesn't question the manifests. Everyone does their small part of an illegal operation without knowing it's illegal. Compartmentalization, I said. Military tactic. Richard served, Thomas said quietly. Did you know that? 2 years in the Army? 1982 to 1984? Logistics Division. He learned how to move things from point A to point B without leaving traces, and he's been using those skills ever since. I sipped my coffee and moved closer to the timeline wall. There were so many photographs, so many documents. A whole secret history of the man I'd called a mentor for 13 years. My mother, Nicole said, and I turned to look at her. She was standing by a section of the timeline marked 1997 to 1999, her hand resting on a photograph of a young woman with dark hair and Nicole's same intelligent eyes, Lily Barrett. She was 25 when Richard hired her. Smart, ambitious, fresh out of business school. She thought she was getting an opportunity to learn from a successful entrepreneur. She thought he loved her, Thomas added, his voice rough. Nicole's jaw tightened. He was good at making people believe that, making them believe they were special, that they mattered. My mother got pregnant in 1998. Richard promised to leave Margaret, to do right by her. Instead, he handed her $1 million and a non-disclosure agreement. Told her if she ever told anyone he was my father, he'd destroy her. Sue her for every penny. Ruin her reputation. Make sure she never worked in business again. She took the money. She was terrified and alone and 26 years old. Of course, she took the money. She moved to Denver, invested it carefully, started a small consulting business, raised me, and she never told anyone about Richard, not until I was 16. Nicole pulled the photograph of her mother off the wall and held it, staring at the frozen moment captured in the image. I came home from school one day and found her sitting at the kitchen table with a bottle of wine and a manila folder. She was crying. She told me everything. Richard, the affair, the NDA, the money. She told me she'd been diagnosed with a heart condition. Nothing serious, the doctor said. Manageable, with medication. But she wanted me to know the truth about my father before anything happened to her. And then she died, I said softly. 3 weeks later, sudden cardiac arrest. The doctors were shocked. She'd been healthy, taking her medication. No warning signs. I was 16 years old, an orphan, and I knew. I couldn't prove it, but I knew. Richard had killed her. Thomas moved to stand next to Nicole, putting a hand on her shoulder. The gesture was gentle, paternal. the gesture of a man who'd spent years trying to fill the void left by a woman's death. Thomas was my dad's friend, Nicole said. My real dad, Lily's brother. He died in a construction accident when I was 6. Thomas kept in touch with my mom, checked on us, sent birthday cards. When she died, he took me in, became my guardian, and when I told him what I suspected about Richard, I believed her, Thomas said, because I knew who Richard Chen really was. Your father knew too, Daniel. That's why I've been looking for you. I set down my coffee mug before I could drop it. What do you mean, my father knew? Thomas moved to a file cabinet and pulled out a folder marked Peterson, James, USMC. He handed it to me with the kind of reverence people use when handling sacred objects. Inside were photographs of my father in his Marine uniform, younger than I'd ever seen him, awards and commendations, and then stapled to a handwritten note, a business card for Chen Industries. Your father saved my life in Kosovo, Thomas said. 1,999. We were doing peacekeeping work, and our convoy got ambushed. Your dad pulled me out of a burning vehicle, took shrapnel to his leg doing it. We recovered in the same hospital, became friends, real friends. The kind you make when someone's seen you at your absolute worst and still thinks you're worth saving. I stared at my father's handwriting. The note read, Thomas, keep an eye on this company. Something wrong about it. J. What happened? We got back to the States in late 1999, Thomas said. Your dad got out of the Marines, started working construction. I stayed in, did another tour, but we kept in touch. And in 2002, your dad called me. Said he'd been doing some construction work for Chen Industries. Richard was building a new warehouse in the Midwest. Your dad noticed things. Discrepancies in the building plans. Spaces that didn't make sense. Hidden rooms. He started asking questions. My father. My quiet, hard-working father who'd never talked about his work. Who'd come home tired and dusty and had never, ever mentioned Richard Chen. What kind of questions? The dangerous kind. He went to the police with his concerns. They investigated. Found nothing. The hidden rooms in the warehouse were for climate-controlled storage, perfectly legitimate. The discrepancies were architectural necessities. Everything Richard did was just barely legal enough to avoid prosecution. But your dad didn't drop it. He kept digging. And then, he died, I said. The words felt heavy. Scaffolding collapse. 2013. They said it was an accident. Faulty equipment. Your father was the most safety-conscious man I ever knew, Thomas said. He checked and double-checked everything. That's what kept him alive in Kosovo when the rest of our convoy died. He didn't make mistakes with equipment. The room was too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud and insistent. You think Richard killed my father. I think your father got too close to something Richard couldn't afford to have exposed. And I think 2 weeks later, Richard hired a new safety inspector for his construction sites. And I think that inspector found that the scaffolding that killed your father had been tampered with. And I think that inspector was offered a very generous severance package and an NDA in exchange for keeping quiet about it. Nicole handed me another folder. Inside was a settlement agreement, dated 3 weeks after my father's death. The safety inspector's signature. The amount, $500,000. The clause, perpetual silence about any and all findings related to the incident. We found him 2 years ago, Nicole said. The inspector. He's dying of lung cancer now. Guilty conscience. He told us everything, but he won't testify. The NDA has teeth, and Richard's lawyers are vicious. The inspector has grandkids he wants to leave money to. He can't afford to break the agreement. I sat down heavily in one of the folding chairs. My father had been killed by Richard Chen, and I'd spent the last 13 years working for the man who'd murdered him, calling him mentor, trying to earn his respect, marrying his daughter. The room spun. Or maybe I spun. It was hard to tell. Daniel, Thomas said gently, breathe. I realized I'd been holding my breath. I gasped, dragged air into my lungs, tried to make sense of a world that had inverted completely in the span of 3 hours. "You said you've been looking for me." I managed. "Why?" "Because you were the missing piece," Thomas said. "We had evidence of money laundering, corruption, suspicious deaths, but we didn't have proof. Not the kind that would hold up in court. Everything we had was circumstantial. And then, 3 years ago, Nicole discovered something." Nicole pulled up a file on her laptop. "I've been monitoring Chen Industries' digital footprint since I was 18, looking for vulnerabilities, for evidence, for anything I could use. And I found something interesting. In 2018, Richard hired a new senior operations director, someone with no family connections, no MBA from a fancy school, no obvious reason to be elevated so high, so fast." "Me," I said. "You. I looked into your background, found out your father was James Peterson, found out he'd worked for Richard, found out he'd died in a suspicious accident. And I realized Richard had brought the son of a man he'd killed into his inner circle. Why would he do that?" "He didn't know," I said slowly. "I never mentioned my father's construction work. I was in grad school when he died. Richard knew I'd lost my father, but I never talked about how. I never made the connection between Peterson Construction Services and Chen Industries." "Exactly. You were invisible to him. Just another ambitious kid trying to marry up. So he used you, gave you access to everything, let you document his entire operation. And when you produced that operational review, when you handed him a comprehensive map of his empire, he realized you'd seen too much. I've thought about that review. 2 months of work, full access to every database, every contract, every supplier relationship. I documented it all, organized it, analyzed it. I'd thought I was showing initiative, proving my worth. I'd been building the evidence that would destroy him." "Your operational review," Nicole said, pulling my laptop out of my overnight bag. "May I?" I nodded. She opened it, typed in my password that I'd unconsciously told her when she asked earlier in the car, and pulled up my files. There it was. Chen, Operations, Review, Final, PDF. 247 pages of detailed analysis. Nicole's eyes scanned the document, and with each page, she scrolled through. Her smile grew wider. "This is beautiful," she breathed. "Daniel, this is everything. You documented supplier relationships we've been trying to prove for years. You mapped financial flows that connect to shell companies we knew existed but couldn't link. You even, oh my God, you even identified the discrepancy in the defense contracts. You flagged it as an inefficiency. You thought the extra weight was sloppy inventory management. What was it really?" "Proof," Thomas said. "Proof that Richard's been using military logistics to move illegal goods. With your documentation, with your access credentials, with your testimony, we can finally prove it. All of it." I looked at the laptop screen, at 2 months of my life distilled into a PDF, at evidence I'd compiled without knowing what I was really doing, at the weapon I'd accidentally forged. "What happens now?" I asked. Nicole and Thomas exchanged another look. This one was different, anticipatory, almost hungry. "Now," Nicole said, "we plan. We have the evidence. We have you. We have 8 years of investigation ready to go. But we need to be smart. Richard Chen doesn't go down easy. He has connections, money, lawyers who could make a murder charge look like a parking ticket. We need to hit him from every direction at once. And we need to do it before Brandon Mitchell finishes erasing the databases," Thomas added. "Once your documentation is gone from the company servers, your backup becomes the only copy, which makes you the only witness who can authenticate it." "How long do we have?" "Based on Mitchell's timeline, maybe 3 weeks before he completes the system restructuring. But Richard will move faster than that if he realizes you're not broken. If he suspects you're planning something. I thought about Richard, waking up in his penthouse tomorrow morning, satisfied, confident that he'd handled the problem of Daniel Peterson, that his empire was secure, his secrets safe, his replacement consultant busy erasing the evidence. He told me I was too old to be useful, I said. Nicole smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was a smile that promised fire and reckoning. Let's show him exactly how useful you can be. Outside, the snow had stopped. Through the farmhouse windows, I could see the first hint of dawn touching the horizon gray light creeping into a sky that had been dark for too long. It was 5:23 a.m. on January 1st, 2024. Somewhere in Chicago, Richard Chen was sleeping peacefully. Not for long. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face. Not the way I remembered him from the funeral, gray and still and wrong, but the way he'd been when I was a kid. Laughing at something stupid I'd said, teaching me to tie a tie for my first job interview, standing in the doorway of my dorm room, proud and awkward, the day he dropped me off at college. "You're going to do great things, Danny," he'd said. I'd spent 13 years trying to prove him right. Turned out I'd spent 13 years working for the man who'd killed him. The sky outside the farmhouse windows had shifted from black to gray to that pale winter blue that looks like hope if you squint hard enough. I sat at one of the folding tables, my untouched third cup of coffee going cold beside me, staring at my operational review on the laptop screen. 247 pages. Every page a nail in Richard Chen's coffin, if we did this right. If we didn't, every page was a death sentence for me. "You should eat something." I looked up. Nicole stood in the doorway, holding a plate with toast and scrambled eggs. She was still wearing the same clothes from last night, jeans and the Northwestern sweatshirt, but her hair was wet from a shower. And she looked more alert than anyone had a right to be at 6 in the morning after the night we'd had. "Not hungry," I said. "Eat anyway. We've got a long day ahead, and you're going to need your strength." She set the plate down in front of me with the kind of finality that suggested arguing would be pointless. "Thomas is making calls. We have some people we need to bring into the loop." "What people?" "FBI agents who aren't on Richard's payroll. Journalists who can't be bought. Lawyers who specialize in RICO cases. The kind of people who've been waiting for someone to hand them a case against Richard Chen on a silver platter." I picked up a piece of toast, bit into it mechanically. It tasted like cardboard, but Nicole was right. I needed to eat, needed to stay functional, needed to be sharp for whatever came next. "You've thought about this," I said. "The end game, how it all plays out." Nicole sat down across from me. "I've thought about nothing else for 8 years. Every scenario, every angle, every possible way Richard could slither out of consequences. The man is a master of survival. He's gotten away with murder, fraud, money laundering, corruption, crimes that would have buried anyone else. You know why? Money? Connections? Caffeinated drain. Fear," Nicole corrected. "Richard's real genius is making people afraid of what happens if they cross him. Witnesses die. Evidence disappears. Careers get destroyed. Families get ruined. He's built an empire on the foundation of terror, disguised as business acumen." I thought about the safety inspector who'd found evidence of sabotage on the scaffolding that killed my father. $500,000 and an NDA. Enough money to secure his family's future, enough legal threat to ensure his silence. How many other people had Richard bought? How many had he scared into submission? "So how do we beat that?" I asked. "How do we take down someone who's made fear his business model?" "We give people something more powerful than fear." Nicole pulled her laptop over and opened a new file. "We give them courage by being courageous. We give them hope by showing them Richard can bleed. And we do it all at once, so fast and from so many directions that he can't contain it. She turned the laptop to show me a document. It was a timeline, but not like the one on the wall. This one mapped forward, not backward. A battle plan. Week 1, she said, pointing to the first section. We compile everything. Your operational review gets cross-referenced with our existing evidence. Every connection, every transaction, every crime. Thomas has a contact at the FBI Special Agent Victoria Martinez. She's been trying to build a case against Richard for 5 years, but she's never had enough evidence. We give her everything. She opens a formal investigation. Richard will know something's happening the moment the FBI comes knocking. That's the point. We want him scared. We want him making mistakes. Scared people scramble. They call in favors, lean on connections, make moves that expose them. And while he's busy trying to contain the FBI investigation, we hit him from the other directions. She scrolled down. Week 2, we go to the press. Not mainstream media, Richard owns too many of them, but investigative journalists, the kind who love taking down powerful men. We leak selected evidence, financial documents that show money laundering, emails that prove fraud, photos that connect him to known criminals. Nothing classified, nothing that compromises the FBI investigation, but enough to create a media firestorm. His lawyers will file injunctions, claim defamation. Let them. Every legal action he takes is another story. Every attempt to silence the press is proof he's hiding something. And while his lawyers are busy with that, Week 3, I said, following her logic. What happens in Week 3? Nicole's smile was cold. Week 3 is when we file the lawsuits, wrongful death suits on behalf of my mother's estate, on behalf of your father's estate, civil RICO suits that freeze his assets, shareholder derivative suits that challenge his control of Chen Industries. We bury him in litigation from every direction. Even if he wins every case, which he won't, the legal fees will be astronomical, and the discovery process will expose even more evidence. I stared at the timeline. It was elegant, methodical, the kind of plan you made when you'd spent 8 years thinking about nothing but revenge. This destroys everything, I said quietly. Chen Industries, Sarah's trust fund, the company's employees. There are thousands of people who work for Richard. Innocent people who have nothing to do with his crimes. I know. Nicole's voice was soft. You think I haven't thought about that? You think I don't know that when Richard falls, a lot of collateral damage comes with him? But what's the alternative? Let him keep operating? Let him keep laundering money and bribing officials and killing people who get too close to his secrets? She leaned forward, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw real emotion crack through her controlled exterior. My mother died, Daniel. Your father died. Senator Morrison died. His daughter died. How many others? How many people has Richard destroyed because we didn't have the courage to bring him down? That's on us if we walk away. That's on us if we decide protecting his employees is more important than stopping him. The eggs were cold now, congealing on the plate. I pushed it away and pulled the laptop closer, studying the timeline. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything. Your testimony about the operations. Your authentication of the documents. Your willingness to stand up in court and say, I saw this, I documented this. This is real. Without you, we have evidence but no chain of custody. We have documents but no one to verify them. You're the linchpin, Daniel. The whole plan pivots on you. Thomas appeared in the doorway. He'd changed clothes, button-down shirt, jeans, looking more like a suburban dad than a man planning to destroy a criminal empire. But his eyes were sharp, focused. Martinez is in, he said. She'll meet with us tomorrow. Wants to see the evidence, hear Daniel's story. If it's as solid as I told her, she'll open an official investigation by the end of the week. And the journalists? Nicole asked. Chen is on board. So is Patterson at the Tribune. They'll hold the story until we give them the signal. But they want exclusivity. They want to be the ones who break it. Nicole nodded, typing notes into her laptop, watching them work together, the easy communication, the shared purpose. I realized this wasn't new for them. This was practiced, refined. They'd been preparing for this moment for years. "What about Sarah?" I asked. The typing stopped. Thomas and Nicole exchanged a glance. "What about her?" Nicole said carefully. "She's going to call. Text. Eventually she's going to realize I'm not at a hotel sulking. She's going to start looking for me. And when Richard realizes I've vanished, he'll assume you ran," Thomas said, took the severance package and disappeared. "That's what he wants. That's what makes you safe. A man hiding in Indianapolis isn't a threat. But I'm not hiding in Indianapolis. Richard doesn't know that. And Sarah." Thomas paused. "Sarah chose her side last night, Daniel. She sat at that table and watched her father destroy you. She didn't defend you, didn't question it. She was relieved." The words stung because they were true. I'd seen it in her eyes. Relief. Like I was a problem finally solved. "She didn't know," I said, though even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. "She didn't know what Richard really is." "Maybe not," Nicole said. "But she knew him well enough to choose him over you. That tells you everything you need to know about where her loyalties are." My phone, still turned off since last night, sat on the table like a small black bomb. Eventually I'd have to turn it on. Eventually I'd have to face whatever messages were waiting. But not yet. Not while I was still processing the fact that my entire adult life had been built on foundations of murder and lies. "I need to see them," I said abruptly. "See who?" "The files. The evidence. Everything you have about my father's death. About your mother. About all of it. If I'm going to do this, if I'm going to be your weapon, I need to understand exactly what I'm fighting for." Nicole studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. She stood and moved to the file cabinet, pulling out 2 folders, one marked Barrett, Lily, the other Peterson, James. "These are the hard copies," she said, setting them in front of me. "Everything we could find. Police reports, autopsy records, witness statements, financial documents. Fair warning, they're not easy to read." I opened my father's folder first. The first document was the police report from the accident. Scaffolding collapse at Chen Industries warehouse construction site, the 15th of June, 2013. 1 fatality. James Peterson, age 56. Cause of death, blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. The report described the scene: equipment failure, structural collapse, tragic accident. There was a note about the safety inspection that followed, marked inconclusive findings. Underneath was the settlement agreement with the inspector, the one who'd found evidence of tampering, the one who'd taken $500,000 to stay quiet. Then photographs. Not of my father, thank God, I couldn't have handled that, but of the scaffolding. Close-ups of bolts that looked sheared rather than broken, metal that seemed cut rather than fractured. Evidence that made it clear this wasn't an accident. "The inspector said the cuts were precise," Nicole said quietly. She was reading over my shoulder. Professional. Someone who knew exactly which supports to compromise to make it look like structural failure. "Richard has people who do this kind of work. Richard has money. Money buys people who do any kind of work." I closed the folder, my hand shaking. Opened the other one. Lily Barrett. The autopsy report listed cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest. Myocardial infarction. The doctor's notes described a young woman with a manageable heart condition, properly medicated, no history of events. Then, out of nowhere, catastrophic heart failure. "They tested for toxins," I said, scanning the toxicology report. "Standard tests. They found nothing. But there are substances rare, expensive, hard to detect, that can trigger cardiac events in people with pre-existing conditions. Potassium chloride, for instance, mimics natural heart attack, breaks down quickly in the body. Unless you specifically test for it within hours of death, it's invisible. Did they test for it? No. Why would they? She had a documented heart condition. The death seemed natural. It wasn't until later when I started putting pieces together that it looked suspicious. I studied the photograph of Lily Barrett, clipped to the inside of the folder. She was beautiful, young, bright-eyed, smiling at the camera, with the kind of confidence that suggested she had her whole life ahead of her. She looked like Nicole. Same eyes, same sharp intelligence in her face. "I'm sorry," I said. "About your mother. About what Richard took from you." "I'm sorry about your father," Nicole replied. "About what you lost. About the years you spent trying to earn approval from the man who murdered him." We sat in silence for a moment. Two people bound together by grief and rage and the shared understanding of what Richard Chen really was. Thomas cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt, but we've got work to do. Martinez wants all the files digitized and organized before tomorrow's meeting." "The journalists need summarized versions with supporting documents, and we need to start planning your testimony. What you'll say, how you'll say it, how we keep you safe while you're saying it." "Safe?" I asked. "Richard's killed at least 4 people that we can prove. Probably more. You think he'll hesitate to make it 5 if you become a threat?" The thought hadn't occurred to me. Or maybe it had, and I'd been too overwhelmed to process it. But now, sitting in a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere with evidence of multiple murders spread across folding tables, the reality settled in. Richard Chen had killed my father. If I moved against him, I'd be next. "What kind of protection can you offer?" I asked. "FBI witness protection once the official investigation opens," Thomas said. "Until then, you stay here. Off the grid. No credit cards. No phone calls. No digital footprint. As far as the world knows, you disappeared on New Year's Eve, just another broken man running from his failures." I thought about my apartment in Chicago, my things, my life, everything I'd built over 13 years. "I can't just vanish," I said. "People will notice. My friends." "What friends?" Nicole asked, not unkindly. "In the last 13 years, how many friendships did you maintain outside of Chen Industries? How many people in your life aren't connected to Richard in some way?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. The last 13 years had been consumed by work, by proving myself, by trying to become worthy of the Chen family. I'd let friendships lapse, stopped returning calls from college friends, missed reunions, canceled plans because Richard needed something or Sarah wanted to attend some corporate function. I'd isolated myself completely. "This is what Richard does," Thomas said gently. "He finds people who are hungry, talented, alone. He brings them into his orbit, makes them dependent on him. And by the time they realize what's happening, they're too entangled to leave. You're not the first, Daniel. You're just the first one smart enough to document everything before he could discard you." Nicole was typing again, adding to the timeline, refining the plan. I watched her work methodical, focused, driven by 8 years of grief channeled into purpose. She'd lost her mother at 16 and turned that loss into a mission. Spent her entire adult life building a case against the man who'd killed her. And I'd spent my entire adult life trying to please him. "I want to help," I said. "With the files, the organization, whatever you need. I need to do something. I can't just sit here and—" "Then start with this," Nicole said, turning her laptop toward me. "Your operational review. Walk me through it. Every supplier, every financial flow, every discrepancy. Teach me what I'm looking at. Help me understand how to weaponize it." I pulled the laptop closer. The document I'd spent 2 months creating. The work I'd thought would make me CEO. My father had died investigating Richard. I'd nearly died, at least. The person I'd been had died working for him. Now it was time to make that death mean something. Section 1, I said, pointing to the first major heading. Supplier relationships and procurement protocols. This is where the money laundering is most visible, if you know what to look for. Nicole leaned in, her expression sharpening. Thomas pulled up a chair. Outside, the sun had fully risen, pale winter light washing across the snow-covered fields that surrounded the farmhouse. It was 7:42 a.m. on January 1st, 2024. Somewhere in Chicago, Richard Chen was probably having his morning coffee, pleased with himself for having solved the problem of Daniel Peterson. He had no idea that the problem was just beginning. Special Agent Victoria Martinez didn't look like someone who'd spent 5 years trying to build a case against one of the Midwest's most powerful businessmen. She looked like someone's aunt, early 50s, warm smile, sensible shoes, the kind of person who probably baked cookies for church fundraisers and remembered everyone's birthday. Then she opened her mouth, and I understood why Richard Chen had managed to avoid her for half a decade. "Mr. Peterson," she said, sitting down across from me at the farmhouse kitchen table. "I've been waiting 3 years to meet you. You have no idea how long I've been hoping someone like you would walk through my door." It was January 2nd, 4:17 p.m. We'd spent the previous day organizing files, cross-referencing documents, preparing evidence packets. I'd slept maybe 4 hours total, caught in that strange state between exhaustion and adrenaline, where everything feels both hyper-real and distant. My phone was still off. Sarah had probably called dozens of times by now. Richard, too, most likely checking to make sure I'd accepted my dismissal gracefully, making sure I wasn't going to cause problems. If only he knew. Martinez had brought 2 other agents with her younger, harder-looking men who stood by the door like bookends. But it was Martinez who commanded the room, settling into her chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd interviewed everyone from street criminals to senators. "Thomas has told me some of what you have," she continued, pulling out a digital recorder. "But I need to hear it from you. Everything. Starting with when you first joined Chen Industries. Do I have your permission to record this conversation?" "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She pressed record. The small red light blinked on. "This is Special Agent Victoria Martinez, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Chicago Field Office. Present are Special Agents Chen and Kowalski. Also present are Thomas Barrett, Nicole Barrett, and Daniel Peterson. Mr. Peterson, can you state your full name and date of birth for the record?" "Daniel James Peterson, the 15th of March, 1985. And you were employed by Chen Industries from when to when?" "June 2011 to the 31st of December 2023, 12.5 years. Martinez's eyebrows rose slightly. "You're very precise about the end date." Boy. "It was last night," I said. "New Year's Eve. Richard Chen announced my termination at dinner. Said I was too old to be useful. We'll come back to that. Let's start at the beginning. How did you come to work for Chen Industries?" I told her. All of it. Meeting Sarah in grad school. Falling in love with a woman who wrote poetry and dreamed of bookstores. The wedding where Richard had gripped my shoulder and told me to prove myself. Starting in logistics, working my way up, learning Mandarin, missing funerals, sacrificing everything to become the son Richard never had. Martinez listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Nicole sat next to me, her laptop open, ready to pull up supporting documents. Thomas stood by the window, watching the driveway, watching for any sign that someone had followed Martinez here. "And your father?" Martinez said when I mentioned the construction work. "James Peterson. He died in 2013. Scaffolding collapse at a Chen Industries construction site. They called it an accident. But you don't believe it was." "I didn't know it wasn't," I said carefully. "Not until 2 nights ago. I thought I spent 13 years thinking it was just a tragic accident. I worked for the man who killed my father without knowing it. Something flickered across Martinez's face. Sympathy, maybe. Or anger on my behalf. "Tell me about the operational review," she said. This was the part we'd rehearsed. Nicole and I had spent hours yesterday walking through the document, identifying every piece of evidence buried in my analysis. Now, I had to make Martinez understand what she was looking at. In July of last year, Richard asked me to conduct a comprehensive operational review of Chen Industries. He said he wanted to streamline processes, identify inefficiencies, prepare the company for future growth. He gave me full access, every database, every system, every supplier contract. I spent 2 months documenting everything. And you found? What I thought were inefficiencies, suppliers charging above market rates, shipments with mismatched weight specifications, financial flows that seemed unnecessarily complicated, defense contracts that weren't profitable enough to justify the effort we put into maintaining them. Nicole pulled up the relevant sections of the review on her laptop, turning it so Martinez could see. I flagged all of it in my report, I continued. Recommended restructuring supplier relationships, renegotiating contracts, simplifying financial processes. I thought I was helping the company. I thought I was proving I deserved to be CEO. But what you were actually documenting was evidence of money laundering, fraud, and illegal smuggling operations. I pointed to a section of the review. This supplier, Shanghai Precision Industries. I noted that they consistently charged 20% above market rate for electronic components. I thought it was poor negotiation. It was actually a money laundering front. The extra 20% was payment for washing dirty money through legitimate purchase orders. Martinez leaned closer, studying the screen. "Can you prove that?" "Nicole can. She's been tracking Shanghai Precision for 3 years. It's a shell company owned by another shell company that eventually traces back to a known triad organization in Hong Kong. The components are real, the orders are real, but the pricing structure is designed to move money, not maximize profit." Nicole pulled up another document, corporate filings, ownership structures, financial statements that connected the dots I'd unknowingly laid out. "This is good," Martinez said quietly. "This is very good. What else?" We went through it all. Every supplier relationship that was actually a criminal connection, every financial irregularity that masked fraud, the defense contracts that provided cover for smuggling, the warehouse construction projects like the one where my father had died that included hidden storage spaces for illegal goods. 2 hours passed, then 3. Martinez filled 2 legal pads with notes, her agents occasionally asking questions, clarifying details, requesting specific documents. Outside, the winter afternoon faded to dusk, pale light giving way to darkness. "The question I have," Martinez said finally, setting down her pen, "is why now? Richard Chen has been operating this way for decades. He's survived investigations, avoided prosecution, outlasted 3 FBI field chiefs. Why is this time different?" "Because this time you have me," I said. "You have someone who was inside the organization with full access, someone who documented everything without knowing what he was documenting, someone who can testify not just about what the documents say, but about how the systems work, who authorized what, where the bodies are buried. Literally, in some cases," Nicole added darkly. Martinez sat back, studying me with those sharp eyes that probably saw through every lie she'd ever been told. "Mr. Peterson, I'm going to be blunt with you. If we move forward with this, if I open an official investigation based on your testimony, your life is going to change in ways you can't imagine. Richard Chen will come after you with every resource he has. Lawyers, investigators, possibly worse. You'll be under constant surveillance. Your credibility will be attacked. Every mistake you've ever made, every questionable decision, will be dredged up and used against you. And if Richard has killed 4 people that we know of, what makes you think he'll hesitate to make it 5? The room was very quiet. I could hear the old farmhouse settling, wood creaking in the cold. My father died investigating Richard Chen, I said. Nicole's mother died because she knew too much. How many others? How many people has Richard destroyed while the FBI has insufficient evidence to move against him? If I walk away now, if I decide my safety is more important than stopping him, then their deaths meant nothing. And the next person Richard kills, that's on me. Martinez held my gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, she said. Let's do this, but we do it my way. Official investigation opens Monday morning. That gives us the weekend to compile everything, get it organized, build an airtight case. I'll need copies of every document, every file, every piece of evidence you have. I'll need your testimony in writing, signed and witnessed. And I'll need you in protective custody until this is over. What does protective custody look like? Thomas asked. Safe house. Different location from this one, no offense, but Richard probably has resources to find you here eventually. 24-hour protection. No contact with anyone outside the investigation. No phones, no internet. No way for Richard to track you or threaten you. What about Sarah? I asked. The question had been sitting in my chest for 2 days, heavy and painful. My wife, does she get notified? Not until we execute search warrants and make arrests. At that point, she'll know everything. But until then, as far as the world knows, you've disappeared, took Richard's severance package, and vanished. That's your best protection. Let Richard think he won. I thought about Sarah waking up on New Year's Day, probably expecting me to come crawling back, apologizing, begging for another chance. Finding my phone, going straight to voicemail, my apartment empty, my car still in the garage at her father's building where I'd left it before that dinner. What would she think? That I'd run away? That I'd broken under the pressure? Would she be relieved? There's something else you should know, Nicole said, pulling up her email on her laptop. I've been monitoring Chen Industries' digital presence. This morning, they posted a press release. She turned the screen so we could all see. The headline read, Chen Industries announces leadership transition and strategic restructuring. I read the first paragraph. Chen Industries, a leader in international manufacturing and supply chain management, announced today the appointment of Brandon Mitchell as Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately. Mr. Mitchell, a distinguished consultant and MIT graduate, will spearhead the company's digital transformation initiative. The appointment follows the departure of Daniel Peterson, who served as Senior Operations Director. We're grateful for Daniel's contributions, said CEO Richard Chen, and wish him well in his future endeavors. Future endeavors. As if I'd chosen to leave. As if this had been mutual. They're already rewriting history, I said. Standard corporate playbook, Martinez said. Make it look voluntary. Maintain the image of stability. But look at the timing posted this morning, less than 36 hours after your dismissal. That's fast. Richard's moving quickly to lock in the narrative before you can contradict it. He's scared, Nicole said, with satisfaction. He fired you on New Year's Eve. You disappeared, and now he's scrambling to control the story. He's worried you might talk. He should be, Martinez said. She stood, gathering her legal pads. Mr. Peterson, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is going to be complicated. Chen has connections that go all the way to Washington. He's donated to senators, congressmen, federal judges. He's going to fight this with everything he has. And some of those fights will happen in rooms where I have no power. But if your evidence is as solid as it appears, and if you're willing to testify, we have a real shot at bringing him down. I'm willing, I said. Then pack your things. You move to the safe house tonight. Thomas and Nicole will coordinate getting all the evidence transferred to our field office. By Monday morning, this becomes an official federal investigation into Richard Chen and Chen Industries for money laundering, fraud, corruption, and conspiracy to commit murder. Murder. The word hung in the air like smoke. Martinez handed me a card with a number on it. This is a direct line to me. The safe house will have a secure phone. You can only call approved numbers, and mine is one of them. If anything happens, if you remember something, if you get scared and want to back out, you call me. Day or night. Understood? I took the card. The paper felt thin and insubstantial, hardly enough to represent the commitment I was making. Understood. Martinez turned to Nicole. You should know the investigation will look into your mother's death. If there's evidence Richard was involved, we'll pursue it. But I can't promise we'll find enough for charges. It's been 8 years. Evidence degrades. Witnesses forget or disappear. I know, Nicole said. But at least someone will be looking. That's more than anyone's done since 2016. After Martinez and her agents left, the farmhouse felt emptier, colder. Thomas started packing up the evidence files, carefully boxing documents, creating inventories, preparing everything for transfer to the FBI. Nicole sat at her laptop, backing up files, encrypting data, making sure nothing could be lost if something went wrong. And I stood by the window, staring out at the dark fields, thinking about Sarah. My phone was in my pocket, still off, still holding 2 days' worth of messages I hadn't read. Part of me wanted to turn it on, to see what she'd said, to know if she'd worried when I didn't come home. Don't, Nicole said, reading my mind. The moment you turn that on, it pings towers, registers on networks. If Richard's looking for you, and he probably is, that phone is a beacon. I know. I just wonder if she cares. Nicole's voice was gentle. Wonder if she's worried? Wonder if maybe she regrets what happened. Something like that. Nicole saved her work and came to stand next to me at the window. In the glass, I could see both our reflections. Two people damaged by the same man in different ways, bound together by the need for justice. My mother used to tell me that the hardest part of loving someone isn't the big betrayals, Nicole said. It's accepting that they were capable of them, that the person you loved and the person who hurt you are the same person. Not a Jekyll and Hyde situation, just one complete human being who chose to prioritize themselves over you. Sarah sat at that table and watched her father destroy me. She did. She didn't say a word in my defense. She didn't. And I keep thinking, if I'd been a better husband, if I'd worked less, if I'd paid more attention to her. Stop. Nicole's voice was sharp now. Don't do that. Don't make this about your failures. Richard is a master manipulator. He convinced his daughter that firing you was merciful, that you were unhappy, that this was for your own good. Sarah didn't defend you because Richard taught her not to see you as worth defending. That's on him and on her for listening. But it's not on you for being too dedicated to a job her father gave you. Through the window, I saw headlights turning onto the long driveway. The FBI coming back, probably, to transport me to the safe house. What if we fail? I asked quietly. What if Richard beats this like he's beaten everything else? What if I give up everything, my marriage, my career, my life, and he still walks away? Nicole was quiet for a moment. Then at least we tried. At least we stood up and said, this is wrong, and I won't let it continue. My mother didn't get that chance. Your father didn't get that chance, but we do, and that has to mean something. The headlights got closer. 2 vehicles, the FBI's black SUVs, coming to take me away from this farmhouse and into whatever came next. I'm scared, I admitted. Good, Nicole said. Fear means you understand the stakes. Fear means you're smart. Just don't let it stop you. Thomas appeared in the doorway. They're here. You ready? Was I ready? Ready to leave behind everything I'd known? Ready to testify against the man who'd killed my father? Ready to destroy my marriage, my career, my entire life in Chicago? I picked up my overnight bag, the same bag I'd grabbed on New Year's Eve, thinking I was heading to a hotel to lick my wounds. Now it was coming with me to an FBI safe house, the only possessions I'd have access to until Richard Chen was either in prison or I was dead. "Yeah," I said. "I'm ready." Outside, the winter air was sharp and clean. Stars scattered across the black sky like spilled diamonds. The FBI agents waited by their vehicles, professional and alert. Nicole followed me out onto the porch. "Hey," she said. "Thank you for doing this, for being brave enough to stand up. Thank you for finding me," I said, "for sitting down in that bus station and not letting me disappear to Indianapolis." She smiled. "Worst New Year's Eve ever, right?" "Or the best," I said. "Depends on how this ends." I got into the back of the SUV. The door closed with a solid thunk, sealing me in. Through the window, I could see Nicole and Thomas on the porch, backlit by the farmhouse light, two silhouettes against the warm glow. Then we pulled away, and they disappeared into the darkness. It was 8:34 p.m. on January 2nd, 2024. In 3 days, the FBI would open an official investigation into Richard Chen. In 3 days, Richard's empire would start to crumble. In 3 days, Sarah would learn that her father was a monster and her husband was a ghost. But tonight, I was just a man in the back of an FBI vehicle, heading toward an unknown safe house, carrying evidence that would either save lives or end mine. The agent driving caught my eye in the rear-view mirror. "You okay back there, Mr. Peterson?" I thought about my father, who died asking dangerous questions, about Nicole's mother, who died knowing dangerous truths, about all the people Richard had destroyed because they'd gotten too close. "Ask me again when this is over," I said. The highway stretched ahead, endless and dark. We drove into it anyway. The safe house was a ranch-style home in a subdivision that looked like every other subdivision in suburban Illinois. Neat lawns, two-car garages, the kind of place where neighbors waved but didn't ask questions. My bedroom window overlooked a backyard with a swing set, abandoned for winter, chains creaking in the wind. I'd been here 3 days. 3 days of beige walls and FBI agents rotating shifts in the living room. 3 days of eating takeout that tasted like cardboard and sleeping in a bed that wasn't mine and watching the clock count down to Monday morning. 3 days of thinking about Sarah. My phone sat on the dresser, still powered off. A dark rectangle of missed connections and unanswered questions. Martinez had given me permission to turn it on once, just to download the messages without responding. I'd declined. Some things were easier not to know. It was Sunday, January 4th. 11:47 a.m. In less than 24 hours, Martinez would walk into FBI headquarters and officially open the investigation into Richard Chen. Search warrants would be issued. Assets would be frozen. The carefully constructed empire Richard had built over 30 years would start to crack. And I was sitting in a safe house in the suburbs, eating cold pizza for breakfast, trying not to lose my mind. "Mr. Peterson?" I turned. Agent Chen, no relation to Richard, he'd assured me with a wry smile on day one, stood in the doorway. Young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of earnest competence that suggested he still believed the FBI always got their man. "There's someone here to see you," he said. "She's been cleared by Agent Martinez." "She?" "Miss Barrett. Nicole. She said you'd want to see her." I followed him downstairs. Nicole sat in the living room, looking out of place among the FBI agents and their tactical gear. She'd changed since I last saw her, dressed in business casual now, her hair styled, looking every inch the professional investigator rather than the grief-driven daughter I'd met in the bus station. "Hey," she said, standing when she saw me. "How are you holding up?" "I've had better weeks." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" Agent Chen led us to the kitchen, then discreetly left. Nicole pulled out a laptop and set it on the small dining table. Martinez asked me to brief you on what's been happening, she said. Figured it was better coming from me than a formal report. What's happening? Nicole opened the laptop to a news website. The headline read, Chicago businessman Richard Chen under federal investigation. My breath caught. That's not supposed to break until tomorrow. Someone leaked it, Nicole said. This morning. We don't know who yet, but the story's everywhere now. Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, Reuters, every major outlet has picked it up. I scanned the article. It was light on details the FBI had declined to comment. Chen Industries had issued a statement denying any wrongdoing. Richard's lawyers were already calling it a politically motivated witch hunt. But the damage was done. The word investigation alone was enough to make investors nervous. Chen Industries stock dropped 18% in the first hour of trading Friday, Nicole said, pulling up a financial chart. By market close, it was down 23%. Richard lost $4 billion in paper wealth in a single day. $4 billion. The number was so large it felt abstract. But the look on Nicole's face was anything but abstract. This was what she'd been working toward for 8 years. Watching Richard bleed. How's he responding? I asked. Nicole pulled up another document, a press release from Chen Industries' public relations firm, time-stamped 6:43 a.m. this morning. Chen Industries categorically denies all allegations of wrongdoing. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities and are confident that this investigation will vindicate both our company and our CEO. These baseless accusations appear to be driven by a disgruntled former employee with a personal vendetta. We will pursue all legal remedies against those seeking to damage our reputation. Disgruntled former employee, I said flatly. That would be me. He's setting up the narrative, Nicole said. Painting you as a bitter ex-employee making false accusations. It's textbook damage control. Attack the credibility of the accuser before the accusations even become public. Does he know I'm the source? He suspects. How could he not? You disappear on New Year's Eve. An FBI investigation opens 5 days later, and it's focused on exactly the areas you documented in your operational review. Richard's not stupid. He knows. I sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. So what does that mean for me? It means he's going to come at you with everything he has. His lawyers will dig into every aspect of your life, every mistake you've made, every lie you've told, every corner you've cut. They'll find the worst possible interpretation of everything and use it to paint you as unreliable, vindictive, corrupt yourself. I haven't done anything corrupt. Doesn't matter. Did you ever fudge numbers on an expense report? Take a longer lunch than you were supposed to? Use company resources for personal business? Everyone has something. And Richard's lawyers are very, very good at finding it. I thought about 13 years at Chen Industries. 13 years of expense reports and timesheets and company credit cards. Had I ever crossed a line? Even accidentally? Probably. Everyone did. In small ways. The question was whether those small ways could be made to look big enough to destroy my credibility. There's something else, Nicole said, her voice quieter now. She pulled up an email on her laptop. Sarah's been trying to reach you. She contacted me yesterday through my mother's old consulting company email. I still monitor it. Said she's desperate to talk to you, that she needs to explain. The words hit harder than I expected. What did you tell her? Does. Nothing. I didn't respond. Martinez said no contact with anyone from your old life, and that includes Sarah. But I thought you should know. She's looking for you. I stared at the email preview on Nicole's screen. I could see the first few lines. Nicole, I know we've never met, but I'm desperate. Daniel's disappeared, and I'm terrified something's happened to him. If you know where he is, please tell him to contact me. Please. I need to explain about New Year's Eve. He doesn't understand what really happened. My father. The preview cut off there. Do you want to know what the rest says? Nicole asked. Did I? Part of me was screaming, yes, read it, know what she's thinking, understand what she wants to explain. But another part, the part that was learning to survive in this new reality, knew that reading that email would only make things harder. No, I said. Not now. Maybe not ever. Nicole closed the laptop. For what it's worth, I think she's genuinely scared. Whether she's scared for you or scared of what you might say, I can't tell. But the emotion seems real. Everything with Sarah always seemed real, I said. That was the problem. I never questioned whether she loved me, because I couldn't imagine her faking it. But love isn't enough. When someone makes you choose between them and your father, Sarah chose. Now she gets to live with that choice. We sat in silence for a moment. Through the kitchen window, I could see Agent Kowalski in the backyard, pacing while he talked on his phone. The swing set creaked in the wind. Martinez wants you to review your testimony one more time before tomorrow, Nicole said. Make sure everything's accurate, that you're comfortable with every statement. Once the investigation goes public, officially public, with charges and warrants, there's no taking it back. I know. And you're sure? Because if you have any doubts, any second thoughts, now is the time, once we cross this line. I'm sure, I said. My father died investigating Richard. Your mother died knowing too much. How many others, Nicole? How many people has he destroyed while we had doubts and second thoughts? She nodded slowly. Okay, then let's make sure we do this right. We spent the next 3 hours going through my testimony, line by line. Every statement cross-referenced with documentary evidence. Every claim backed up by emails, contracts, financial records. Martinez had been right. This was thorough, painstaking, the kind of case that didn't leave room for reasonable doubt. By 3 p.m., my eyes were burning from staring at the laptop screen. Nicole packed up her things, preparing to leave. One more thing, she said, hesitating at the door. Thomas wanted me to tell you he's been in contact with some of your father's old friends, Marines who served with him. He thought you might want to know that they're watching this, that they're proud of what you're doing. Something tight in my chest loosened slightly. I never knew any of them. My dad didn't talk about the Marines much. He talked about you, though. Thomas said your father used to carry a photo of you in his wallet. You at your college graduation. He showed it to everyone. Told them his son was going to change the world. The tightness came back. Different this time. Sharper. I'm not changing the world. I'm just trying to stop one bad man. End quote. Die. Die, O car. Die. Die, O car. Ache. End. Die. 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 Your father would say that's the same thing, Nicole said softly. Stop enough bad men. Eventually the world changes. After she left, I went back to my room. The beige walls felt like they were closing in. 4 days in this house, and I already felt like a ghost disconnected from the life I'd had, not yet solid in whatever came next. My phone sat on the dresser, still off, still holding Sarah's messages, Richard's calls, the entire digital record of a life I'd walked away from. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands. The screen was dark, reflective, showing me my own face distorted in the black glass. I looked tired, older, like someone who'd aged a decade in less than a week. Against every instruction Martinez had given me, against my better judgment, I pressed the power button. The phone vibrated to life. Notifications started rolling in, dozens of them, a digital avalanche of missed connections. Where are you? Please call me. I'm worried. Daniel, we should talk. Richard Chen, call me when you get this. Unknown number. Mr. Peterson, this is Marcus Webb, from Chen Industries Legal Department. We need to discuss your departure. 37 missed calls from Sarah. 15 from Richard. 6 from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails alone would take an hour to go through. I opened the text thread with Sarah. The messages started New Year's Day, grew more frantic as the days passed. 1/1, 9:14 a.m. I know you're upset. Can we please talk? 1/1, 2:37 p.m. Daniel, you're scaring me. Where are you? 1/2, 11:52 p.m. I went to your apartment. You're not there. Your car is still in my dad's garage. Please tell me you're okay. 1/3, 6:08 a.m. I talked to Nicole Barrett. She wouldn't tell me anything. Why would you contact her and not me? What's happening? 1/4, 10:33 a.m. The FBI came to the house. They asked about you, about Dad. Daniel, what did you do? The last message was from this morning, sent 2 hours ago. 1/5, 9:47 a.m. I know you're the one behind the investigation. I don't know why you're doing this, but please, before this goes any further, let me explain. You don't understand what really happened at dinner. You don't know the whole story. My father isn't who you think he is, but neither is yours. Please, call me. My father isn't who I think he is. The words made something cold settle in my stomach. What did she mean by that? I was about to read the next message when the phone was plucked from my hands. Agent Chen stood behind me, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes disappointed. Mr. Peterson, he said quietly, you know you're not supposed to turn that on. I just wanted to. I know what you wanted to do. But that phone just pinged every cell tower between here and Chicago. If anyone's monitoring it and given who we're dealing with, they probably are. They just got a general location. Not precise enough to find this house immediately, but precise enough to narrow the search area. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. No, you were thinking about your wife. He powered the phone off and slipped it into his pocket. I'll give this to Agent Martinez. She'll decide if you get it back. He left me alone in the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands, trying not to think about Sarah's last message. My father isn't who you think he is, but neither is yours. What did that mean? Outside, the winter sun was setting. Long shadows stretched across the backyard. The swing set stood empty and still. Somewhere in Chicago, Richard Chen was mobilizing lawyers and calling in favors and preparing to fight the investigation with everything he had. And somewhere else in Chicago, Sarah was desperately trying to reach me, to explain something I didn't understand about my father. My father, who died, investigating Richard Chen. My father, who'd been killed by scaffolding that was professionally sabotaged. My father, who, according to Thomas, had gotten too close to something Richard couldn't afford to have exposed. What if there was more to that story? What if Sarah knew something I didn't? I stood and went to the door. Agent Chen was in the hallway. I need to call Agent Martinez, I said. She'll be here tomorrow morning before the investigation goes public. Now, I said. I need to call her now. Something's wrong. Sarah said something in her message that I need to talk to Martinez. Agent Chen studied my face, then nodded. I'll call her. 20 minutes later, my phone, now in Martinez's possession, was on speaker in the kitchen. Martinez's voice came through, tired but alert. Mr. Peterson, Agent Chen says you have concerns about one of your wife's messages? She said something about my father, that he isn't who I think he is. What does that mean? Martinez was quiet for a moment. I don't know. Could be a manipulation tactic. Richard's lawyers could have told Sarah to plant doubt, make you question the narrative we've built. Or it could be real information. What if there's something about my father's investigation that we don't know? What if Sarah knows something that changes things? Then she can tell the FBI during her interview, Martinez said firmly. We're bringing her in for questioning Tuesday morning. If she has information, she'll have the opportunity to share it under oath. But you don't get to contact her. You don't get to warn her or ask her what she meant. That's non-negotiable. I just want to understand. I know what you want, but what you want and what keeps this investigation clean are two different things. Sarah's message could be genuine, or it could be bait. Either way, you don't bite. Understood? I closed my eyes. Understood. I rees. Good. Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. The story's already leaked, but tomorrow morning, we make it official. Press conference at 10 a.m. By noon, search warrants will be executed at Chen Industries headquarters and Richard's personal residences. By end of business, we'll have seized computers, documents, records, everything we need to build the criminal case. You did your part. Now let us do ours. The call ended. Agent Chen took the phone back to wherever he was, keeping it locked away. I went back to my room, lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling. My father isn't who you think he is, but neither is yours. The words circled in my mind like vultures. What didn't I know about my father? What had Sarah discovered or been told that I'd missed? Outside, night fell completely. The safe house settled into quiet, just the hum of the heater and the occasional footsteps of agents changing shifts. In the living room, someone had turned on the news. I could hear the anchor's voice, professionally neutral. FBI investigation into Chicago businessman Richard Chen continues to send shockwaves through the business community. Chen Industries stock has lost nearly 30% of its value since news of the investigation broke Friday morning. Sources close to the investigation suggest charges could include money laundering, fraud, and possible connections to organized crime. Possible connections. If they only knew. I rolled over, tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father. Not the man I remembered, but the man I'd never gotten to know. The Marine who'd saved Thomas's life. The investigator who'd gotten too close to Richard's secrets. The man who died asking dangerous questions. What questions had he been asking? And what answers had gotten him killed? Tomorrow, the FBI would start tearing apart Richard Chen's empire. Tomorrow, the truth would start coming out about the money laundering, the corruption, the murders. But tonight, lying in a safe house while my marriage dissolved, and my wife desperately tried to tell me something about my father that I didn't understand, I wondered, what if the truth was more complicated than I thought? What if Richard Chen wasn't the only monster in this story? The wind picked up outside. The swing set creaked and groaned. And somewhere in the night, all the people who knew the real story, the complete story, were making their own preparations for tomorrow. I just hoped I'd chosen the right side. I watched the raid on television. It felt surreal, sitting in a safe house living room with 3 FBI agents, eating stale donuts, watching federal agents swarm Chen Industries headquarters on a 42-inch flat screen. The news helicopter footage showed it all. Black SUVs arriving in formation, agents in windbreakers carrying file boxes, employees being escorted out of the building with their hands visible, faces shocked. There, Agent Kowalski said, pointing at the screen. 3rd floor, corner office. That's Richard's executive suite. End quote. I could see figures moving behind the tinted glass. Agents, probably, going through Richard's files. His computer. His carefully curated world of legitimate business masking criminal enterprise. Somewhere in that building was my old office, my desk, the ergonomic chair I'd spent thousands of hours in while I built the evidence that was now being used to destroy the man I'd called mentor. The news anchor's voice provided commentary. This is an unprecedented move by federal authorities. Sources say the investigation focuses on money laundering, fraud, and possible corruption charges going back decades. Richard Chen's attorney issued a statement this morning, calling the raid an outrageous overreach and promising to fight these charges vigorously. My phone, still in Martinez's possession, had been buzzing constantly since 6 a.m. Sarah, probably. Richard's lawyers, definitely. Maybe reporters who'd somehow gotten my number. The digital ghost of my old life, still trying to reach me even though I'd moved beyond its reach. Martinez had promised to come by after the raids were complete. She'd been leading the operation personally her moment, after 5 years of trying to build this case. I imagined her walking through Chen Industries with search warrants in hand, finally able to demand the answers she'd been denied for so long. It was 11:47 a.m. when she finally arrived. She looked exhausted but satisfied, the kind of tired that comes from accomplishment rather than defeat. She carried a briefcase and a file folder, both bulging with documents. "Mr. Peterson," she said, settling into the armchair across from me. The TV was still on, still showing footage of the raid, but she ignored it. "We need to talk." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. "What happened?" "The raids went well. We seized over 10,000 documents, 47 computers, multiple phones, and several safes that we're currently working to open. Based on a preliminary review, everything you documented appears accurate. Richard Chen is going to have a very difficult time explaining the financial irregularities we've found." "That's good news." "It is." She paused. "But there's something else. Something we found in Richard's personal safe at his penthouse. Something that complicates the narrative." She opened the file folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed 2 men in military uniforms standing in front of what looked like a military vehicle. The photo was old, faded, from the 1,980 seconds based on the style and quality. One of the men was Richard Chen, much younger, lean and hard-looking. The other was my father. I stared at the photograph. "I don't understand. My father never mentioned knowing Richard before." "They served together," Martinez said quietly. 1,983 to 1,984. Same unit, same base, same deployment. According to military records we pulled this morning, James Peterson and Richard Chen were stationed at Fort Bragg together. They weren't just acquaintances, Daniel. They were friends. The room tilted. "That's not possible. My father worked construction for Richard, but he never said, he never mentioned." Martinez pulled out another document, a letter, handwritten, dated March 1996. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. "Richard, I know what you did to Kozlov. I know what you're planning with the import business. I want to give you a chance to make this right before I go to the authorities. We were brothers once. That has to mean something. Meet me. Let's talk about this like the men we used to be." "Jim." The letter shook in my hands. My father had known about Kozlov, known about the money laundering, and he'd written to Richard about it, offered him a chance to come clean. "There's more," Martinez said. She pulled out a second letter, this one from Richard to my father, dated April 1996. "Jim, you don't know what you're asking. The things I've done, the commitments I've made, I can't just walk away. These aren't people who accept resignations. I'm begging you, as your brother, as someone who once saved your life in Grenada, let this go. Take your family and move somewhere far from California. Start over. I'll make sure you have the resources to do it right. Don't make me choose between your safety and my survival. Rick." I read it twice, 3 times. The words wouldn't settle into meaning. "Grenada," I said. "Richard saved my father's life?" According to military records, yes. October 1983. Their unit came under fire during the invasion. Richard pulled your father out of a combat zone while wounded himself. He received a commendation for it. Your father recommended him for a Silver Star. Martinez laid out more documents, military records, discharge papers, and then, devastatingly, a third letter. My father's response to Richard, dated May 1996. Rick, I can't let this go. You know I can't. What you're doing is wrong, and it's going to hurt innocent people. The fact that you saved my life once doesn't give you permission to destroy others. I'm going to the FBI. I'm telling them everything I know. I'm sorry it has to be this way, but you made your choices. Now I have to make mine. I hope someday you'll understand. Jim, your father did go to the FBI, Martinez said. We found the records this morning. He filed a report in June 1996 alleging that Richard Chen was involved in money laundering and had connections to organized crime. The case was investigated and closed due to insufficient evidence. 2 months later, your father moved to Illinois and started Peterson Construction Services. And 17 years after that, he died at one of Richard's construction sites. I finished. Yes. I set the letters down carefully, as if they might explode. So my father did know Richard. They were friends, brothers. And my father tried to turn him in, failed, and moved across the country. And then what? He forgot about it? Just went on with his life? Not forgot, Martinez said. She pulled out one more document, a journal entry, photocopied from a notebook they'd found in Richard's safe. My father's handwriting, dated 2012. I saw Richard's name in the business section today. Chen Industries expanding to the Midwest, building warehouses, creating jobs. Part of me wanted to believe he'd gone legitimate, that the kid I knew in the Army, the one who saved my life, who talked about building something clean and good, had finally found his way. But I know better. Leopards don't change their spots. If Richard's expanding here, it's not for legitimate reasons. I'm gonna find out what he's really doing. I owe it to the people who'll get hurt if I don't. And maybe I owe it to the friendship we used to have. One last chance to save him from himself, the way he once saved me. Tears blurred my vision. I blinked them away, angry at myself for crying, angry at my father for being so noble and stupid, angry at Richard for betraying someone who'd given him chance after chance. Your father got hired on one of Richard's construction crews, Martinez continued. We found the employment records. He used his real name. Richard knew exactly who he was. In fact, we found emails suggesting Richard specifically requested him for the warehouse project. He wanted my father close, I said, where he could watch him, or where he could try to convince him one more time to let it go. We don't know. What we do know is that your father found evidence of illegal construction, hidden rooms, structural modifications that didn't match the official plans. He documented it, and then the scaffolding collapsed. Yes. I stood up, needing to move, needing to do something other than sit still, while my understanding of everything shattered and reformed into something darker and more complicated. So my father wasn't just some random construction worker who got in Richard's way. I said, he was Richard's friend, his brother, someone who saved his life, and Richard killed him anyway. It appears that way, though proving Richard personally ordered the sabotage is still difficult. The safety inspector who found evidence of tampering died last year, lung cancer. We can't compel testimony from a dead man. I turned to face Martinez. But you can use these letters, these documents. They establish a pattern of behavior. They show Richard knew my father was investigating him, that he'd tried to scare him off before, that he had motive. We can use them. Martinez agreed. And we will. But Daniel, you need to understand what this means for your testimony. Richard's lawyers are going to use this. They're going to say your father wasn't an innocent victim. They're going to say he was harassing Richard for decades, making false accusations that the FBI investigated in 1996 and found nothing. They're going to paint your father as obsessed, paranoid, someone with a grudge who couldn't let go. That's not what happened. I know that. You know that. But a jury? They're going to hear that your father accused Richard of crimes in 1996. The FBI found no evidence, and your father kept investigating anyway. They're going to hear that Richard tried to help him, offered him money to start over, gave him a job years later, tried to maintain their friendship despite your father's accusations. And they're going to wonder if maybe your father's death really was just an accident. A tragic end to a man who couldn't accept that his old friend had gone straight. I sank back into the chair. You're saying this hurts our case. I'm saying it complicates it. The narrative was clean before ruthless businessman disposes of inconvenient witness. Now it's former friends, military brothers, complicated history of accusations and investigations that went nowhere. Richard's lawyers will use every bit of it to create reasonable doubt. Through the window, I could see Agent Chen pacing in the backyard, phone to his ear. On the TV, the news had moved on to other stories, but the ticker at the bottom still read, Breaking. FBI raids Chen Industries headquarters investigation ongoing. Sarah knew, I said quietly. That's what she was trying to tell me, that my father and Richard had history, that the story was more complicated than I understood. Martinez nodded. We'll be interviewing her tomorrow. She may have more information. Things Richard told her. Documents she's seen. But Daniel, you need to be prepared for the possibility that some of that information makes this harder, not easier. I don't care how hard it is, I said. Richard killed my father. Whether they were friends or enemies or something in between, he killed him. And he's killed others. And he needs to pay for that. I agree. But justice and vengeance aren't always the same thing. You need to make sure you know which one you're pursuing. The words hung in the air. Justice or vengeance? Was there a difference? My father had pursued justice, gone to the FBI, followed the rules, tried to do things the right way, and it had gotten him killed. Maybe vengeance was the only justice that actually worked. Martinez's phone buzzed. She checked it, frowned. I need to go. We've got Richard's lawyers filing motions already trying to get the search warrants thrown out, claiming procedural violations. It's going to be a long week. What about the charges? When will those be filed? Soon. We need to finish processing everything we seized today, compile the evidence, present it to a grand jury. Probably 2 weeks, maybe 3. In the meantime, you stay here. Stay safe. And think about what I said about justice versus vengeance. After she left, I sat alone in the living room. Agent Chen had come back inside, was making coffee in the kitchen. The TV droned on, background noise to my thoughts. I pulled out the photocopies Martinez had left with me. My father's letters, his journal entries, evidence of a friendship that had curdled into investigation, into obsession, into tragedy. One last chance to save him from himself, the way he once saved me. My father had believed in redemption, believed that the kid Richard had been the one who'd saved his life in Grenada, was still in there somewhere, capable of choosing right over wrong. My father had been wrong. Or had he? What if Richard had struggled with it? What if those letters showed genuine conflict, genuine regret? What if Richard had tried to protect my father by offering him money to leave, tried to keep him safe by giving him a job where Richard could watch over him? What if Richard had loved my father, in his own twisted way, and killed him anyway because that's what survival required? I didn't know which possibility was worse. My phone, still in Martinez's possession, was probably full of messages from Sarah by now. Desperate attempts to explain, to tell me the complicated truth about our father's relationship, to make me understand that the simple narrative of good versus evil wasn't accurate. But I didn't need Sarah to tell me the story was complicated. I'd seen the letters. I knew my father had given Richard multiple chances. I knew Richard had tried, in his own way, to protect my father. And none of it mattered. Because at the end of the day, my father was dead, killed by sabotage scaffolding at a construction site owned by a man who'd once saved his life, a man who'd begged him to let it go, a man who'd chosen his criminal empire over their friendship. Richard Chen had made his choice. Now I was making mine. The sun was setting outside. Through the window, I could see neighbors coming home from work, kids playing in yards, normal life continuing for people who didn't know that 3 miles away, FBI agents were dismantling a criminal organization built on decades of murder and corruption. My father had tried to do this the right way. Files, official reports, trusted the system, believed in justice. And the system had failed him. I wouldn't make the same mistake. If the FBI couldn't get Richard on my father's murder, if the safety inspector was dead and the evidence was circumstantial and Richard's lawyers could create enough doubt to avoid conviction, then I'd make sure he went down for everything else. The money laundering, the fraud, the corruption, the other murders, Kozlov, Senator Morrison, his daughter, Lily Barrett. Somewhere in the thousands of documents the FBI had seized today was enough evidence to bury Richard Chen for the rest of his life. I just had to make sure none of it got lost in legal technicalities or complicated narratives about old friendships and military brotherhood. Martinez was right about one thing. I needed to know whether I was pursuing justice or vengeance. The answer was simple. I was pursuing both. And if the system couldn't deliver, I'd find another way. Agent Chen appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's here. Chinese. Figured you could use some comfort food." I almost laughed. "Chinese food? Of course." "Thanks," I said. "I'll be there in a minute." He left. I gathered up the letters, the journal entries, the photograph of my father and Richard in their uniforms, young and whole, and not yet destroyed by the choices they'd make. 2 men who'd saved each other's lives. 2 men who'd ended up on opposite sides of right and wrong. 2 men whose story had somehow become mine to finish. I folded the documents carefully and placed them in the folder Martinez had left. Tomorrow, Sarah would be interviewed. Tomorrow, more of the story would come out. Tomorrow, I'd learn more about the complicated truth of my father's relationship with Richard Chen. But tonight, I knew enough. I knew my father had tried to save Richard. I knew Richard had killed him anyway. And I knew that whatever happened next, I wouldn't stop until Richard Chen paid for every person he'd destroyed in building his empire. Starting with my father, ending with Richard himself. Martinez called at 7:23 a.m. "She's here," she said without preamble. "Sarah arrived 30 minutes ago with her lawyer. We're about to start the interview. I thought you should know." I'd been awake for hours, watching the sunrise paint the safe house walls from beige to gold to that flat institutional white that suggested government budgets and functional minimalism. 4 days in this house, and I still couldn't sleep past 5 a.m. "Is there audio?" I asked. "Video? Can I? Video? Can I? No. This is a formal FBI interview, not a reality show. But I'll brief you afterward. I thought you'd want to know it's happening." "What's she like? How does she seem?" Martinez was quiet for a moment. Scared. Exhausted. Like someone who's had her entire world turned inside out in less than a week. Her lawyer is Marcus Webb Chen, industry's head legal counsel. Make of that what you will. Marcus Webb, the same lawyer who'd left me voicemails, who'd been crafting Richard's defense strategy, who was paid by Richard to protect Richard's interests, and he was representing Sarah. "So she's still on his side," I said. "Or she doesn't know any other lawyers, or her father insisted, or she genuinely believes he's innocent. People are complicated, Mr. Peterson. Try to remember that." She hung up. I sat in the kitchen with cold coffee and the morning news showing Chen Industries stock continuing its freefall down another 15% overnight as investors fled anything connected to Richard Chen. The financial analysts on CNBC were calling it the fastest wealth destruction in corporate history. $4 billion gone in a week. But money wasn't justice. And Richard still had enough left to fight this for years. Agent Chen found me at 9 a.m., still sitting at the kitchen table, still watching the news cycle through the same footage of FBI raids and shocked employees and Richard's lawyers promising vigorous defense. "You should eat something," he said. "Not hungry." "Yeah, well, you've said that for 3 days straight. Agent Martinez says you've lost weight. Can't have our star witness collapsing from malnutrition." He made eggs anyway. I ate them mechanically, tasting nothing, thinking about Sarah sitting in an FBI interview room with Richard's lawyer whispering in her ear, telling her what to say, what not to say, how to protect her father while maintaining plausible deniability. Or maybe I was being unfair. Maybe Sarah had demanded answers from Richard, had discovered the truth about what he really was, had come to the FBI voluntarily to tell them everything. Maybe, but I doubted it. The call came at 2:47 p.m. "It's done," Martinez said. She sounded tired. 4 hours. "We're processing the recording now, but I wanted to give you the highlights." "Tell me." Sarah confirmed most of what we already knew. "Yes. Richard asked her to support the decision to terminate you." "Yes. They'd been discussing it for months." "Yes. Brandon Mitchell was brought in specifically to restructure the operational systems you documented." She claims she didn't know why, just that her father said the company needed fresh thinking and that you were burned out. "Did she know about the money laundering? The fraud?" She says no. Says she's worked in the marketing division for the past 5 years. Had no access to operational or financial systems. Says her father kept business and family separate, that she knew Chen Industries was successful, but not how it made its money. "Do you believe her?" Martinez paused. "Honestly, I think she's telling the truth about not knowing the details. But I also think she made a choice not to look too closely. Richard Chen's daughter has lived a very comfortable life. Sometimes it's easier not to ask where the comfort comes from." I thought about our apartment, the penthouse views, the car Richard had given us as a wedding present, the vacation homes in Aspen and the Hamptons that we used twice a year, Sarah's trust fund that meant she never had to worry about money, never had to make the kind of compromises normal people made. "What about my father?" I asked. "What did she say about the history between Richard and my dad?" She knew about it. Richard told her years ago. Said he'd served with your father, that they'd been friends, that they'd had a falling out over business disagreements. Said your father had made accusations that were investigated and disproven. Said it was a source of great pain for him, losing a friend that way. "Did he tell her he killed him?" "Of course not. But here's where it gets interesting. Sarah said that when you submitted your operational review last summer, Richard became anxious, started making comments about history repeating itself, about how your father had been obsessed with finding problems that didn't exist, and now you were following the same pattern." My hand tightened on the phone. He compared me to my father. Multiple times, according to Sarah. He told her that you were becoming paranoid like your father had been, that you were seeing conspiracies where there were just normal business practices, that he needed to let you go before you damaged the company the way your father had tried to damage it decades ago. And Sarah believed him. She believed her father. Yes, who she's known her whole life, who raised her, who she had no reason to distrust, until now. I stood, paced to the window. Outside, suburban normalcy continued, someone mowing their lawn despite the January cold, a dog being walked, kids riding bikes home from school. Life continuing for people who hadn't had their entire existence detonated. "Did she ask about me?" I said quietly. "Where I am? If I'm okay?" Martinez's voice softened. "She did. Several times. She's very worried about you, Daniel. She thinks you're in danger. That you've gotten caught up in something you don't understand. She's right about that. Just not the way she thinks. She wants to talk to you. She asked if we could arrange a phone call, supervised by us, so she could explain everything. so you could understand her perspective. My throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her I'd ask you. It would have to be recorded, monitored, nothing about your location or the safe house. But if you wanted to hear what she has to say. No, I said. The word came out harder than I intended. No, I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Okay? I'll let her know. After Martinez hung up, I sat in the living room and tried to imagine what that conversation would be like. Sarah's voice, explaining how she'd been manipulated by her father. How she'd thought she was helping me by supporting the termination. How she'd had no idea about the criminal empire her comfortable life was built on. And what would I say? That I'd spent 13 years trying to earn her father's approval while he planned to dispose of me? That I'd worked for my father's murderer without knowing it? That our entire marriage had been built on foundations of lies I was too blind to see? Agent Kowalski appeared in the doorway. You've got another visitor, Nicole Barrett. She says it's urgent. Nicole looked different. Sharp. Professional. But underneath the composed exterior, I could see something burning the same fire that had driven her for 8 years. We've got a problem, she said, setting her laptop on the coffee table. Or maybe an opportunity. I'm not sure which yet. She pulled up an email and turned the screen toward me. It was from an address I didn't recognize, sent to Nicole's mother's old consulting company email. Miss Barrett? My name is Dr. James Kowalski. I was Richard Chen's personal physician from 2008 to 2022. I'm reaching out because I believe you're investigating Mr. Chen and I have information that might be relevant. I can't discuss this via email or phone, but if you're willing to meet in person, I can provide documentation of treatments I administered that Mr. Chen specifically instructed me never to record in official medical files. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I have perhaps 3 months. I'm not looking for immunity or protection. I just want someone to know the truth before I'm gone. Please contact me at the number below if you're interested. J.K. I read it twice. Treatments he didn't record officially. What kind of treatments? That's what I need to find out. I've run background on Dr. Kowalski. He's legitimate. Johns Hopkins medical degree, 30 years of practice, specializes in cardiology and internal medicine. He did serve as Richard's personal physician until last year, and according to public records, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in October. This could be a trap, Agent Chen said from the doorway. He'd been listening. Richard could have set this up. Get Nicole to meet with this doctor, follow her, find out where Mr. Peterson is. I thought of that, Nicole said. But Martinez already checked him out. She called him this morning. He's willing to meet at the FBI field office, willing to provide documentation, willing to testify if needed. He just wants it done quickly because he's declining fast. What kind of documentation? I asked. Nicole pulled up another email, this one from Martinez, forwarding scanned images, medical records, prescriptions, and then a photograph that made my blood run cold. It showed a vial of clear liquid, labeled in medical terminology I didn't fully understand, but Nicole did. Potassium chloride, she said quietly, in a dosage and formulation specific to triggering cardiac events in patients with pre-existing heart conditions. Dr. Kowalski says Richard requested 5 vials of this in March 2016, 1 month before my mother died. The room went silent. Agent Chen moved closer, studying the image. Agent Kowalski appeared from the kitchen, also looking. I couldn't finish the sentence. Murder, Nicole said. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly as she gripped the laptop. That's what killed my mother. And Dr. Kowalski can prove Richard ordered it. Can prove he filled the prescription. Can testify that Richard specifically asked him not to record it in official files. Said it was for a research project. Why is he coming forward now? Agent Chen asked. After 8 years? Nicole scrolled down to another part of the email. Because his daughter just got engaged to someone she met at Chen Industries. Richard attended their engagement party last month. Dr. Kowalski saw him there, saw him being charming and generous and acting like a benevolent corporate leader, and he realized his silence had protected a murderer who was now in his daughter's life. He can't live with that. Literally, he's dying, but he wants to die, having told the truth. I stared at the photograph of the vial. Such a small thing, clear liquid in a glass container, but enough to stop a human heart. Enough to make a healthy 34-year-old woman die suddenly of natural causes that nobody questioned. When is Martinez meeting with him? I asked. Tomorrow morning. She wants us there. Me, because it's my mother's case. You, because your testimony about Richard's patterns of behavior supports the narrative of premeditated murder. Can she use this? Is it admissible? That's for lawyers to figure out, Nicole said. But yes, probably. Dr. Kowalski didn't participate in the murder, he just filled a prescription he shouldn't have. He can testify about what Richard requested, when, and why it was unusual. Combined with the autopsy report showing my mother died of cardiac arrest, combined with Richard's motive to silence her before she went public about their affair, it builds a case. Agent Chen pulled out his phone. I need to call Martinez. This changes everything. If we can prove murder, if we can get Dr. Kowalski's testimony on record. He walked away, already dialing. Nicole and I sat in the living room, the laptop still open, to the photograph of the vial that had killed her mother. I'm sorry, I said, that you have to see this, that you have to know exactly how he did it. I already knew, Nicole said, or suspected. Anyway, potassium chloride was always the most likely method. Hard to detect, mimics natural heart attack, breaks down quickly. But suspecting and knowing are different. Suspecting and having documentation are very different. Your mother died for knowing too much about Richard, I said. My father died for investigating him. How many others, Nicole? We'll find out. Dr. Kowalski says he has other records, other prescriptions, other unusual requests. 20 years of being Richard Chen's personal physician means 20 years of medical secrets. The news was still playing on the TV, muted now but still showing the same cycle of footage. Chen Industries, FBI raids, stock prices falling, Richard's lawyers filing motions. But none of them knew about Dr. Kowalski yet. None of them knew that Richard's personal physician was about to provide evidence of murder. What happens after tomorrow? I asked. After Martinez gets Dr. Kowalski's testimony? She files murder charges, not just fraud and money laundering, actual murder. And suddenly, Richard's lawyers can't dismiss this as white-collar crime. Suddenly, he's not a businessman who cut corners. He's a killer who's been getting away with it for decades. I thought about Sarah, sitting in her father's penthouse, probably crying, probably scared, probably still believing that there was some explanation that would make this okay. That her father was flawed, but not evil. That the FBI was wrong. The evidence was circumstantial. The charges were overblown. Wait until she learned her father had murdered people. Wait until she learned that the vial of potassium chloride had been ordered specifically to kill Nicole's mother. Wait until she understood that the man who'd walked her down the aisle, who'd held her when she cried, who'd paid for her wedding and her trust fund and her comfortable life, was a murderer. I should call her, I said. Sarah, I should warn her before this comes out. Nicole looked at me for a long moment. Why? Why? Because she's my wife. Because she deserves to know what's coming. Because you still love her, Nicole finished. Even after everything, even knowing she chose him over you, you still want to protect her. I couldn't deny it. Despite everything, the betrayal, the relief in her eyes when Richard fired me, the dinner table where she'd sat silent while her father destroyed me, I still felt something for Sarah. Love, maybe, or the ghost of it. or just the memory of who we'd been before Richard's empire swallowed us both. Love's not enough, Nicole said quietly. My mother loved Richard. Your father tried to save him because they'd been brothers. Sarah loved you and still chose her father. Love doesn't fix this. It doesn't change what Richard is or what he's done. I know. Do you? Because I see you sitting here, wanting to warn Sarah, wanting to protect her from the consequences of her father's actions. And I understand that impulse. But you need to understand something. Sarah's comfort, her peace of mind, her ability to keep believing in her father, all of that was built on my mother's grave, on your father's grave, on everyone Richard destroyed to maintain his empire. The words hit like a physical blow, because they were true. Sarah's trust fund came from money Richard laundered. Sarah's education came from profits Richard made through fraud. Sarah's entire life, the life I'd tried so hard to be worthy of, was built on foundations of murder and corruption. And warning her about Dr. Kowalski's testimony wouldn't change that. It would just give Richard's lawyers advance notice. Time to prepare. Time to discredit the doctor before he could testify. You're right, I said. I won't call her. Nicole nodded. Good. Because tomorrow, we make sure Richard can't hurt anyone else. Tomorrow, Dr. Kowalski tells the truth. And tomorrow, your wife learns who her father really is. She closed the laptop and stood. I should go. Martinez wants me to review my mother's medical records before the meeting tomorrow. Make sure I understand the timeline, the symptoms, everything that lines up with potassium chloride poisoning. Nicole, I said, and she turned. When this is over, when Richard's convicted and sentenced and everything, what will you do? She smiled sadly. I don't know. I've spent 8 years of my life on this. 8 years of investigation and documentation and waiting for the right moment. I don't know who I am without this mission. You're someone whose mother would be proud, I said. Her eyes filled with tears. She blinked them away quickly, maintaining the composure that had carried her through 8 years of grief and rage. Thank you, she said. That means more than you know. After she left, I sat alone in the living room. The sun was setting again. Another day in the safe house. Another day of waiting while the investigation ground forward. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, Dr. Kowalski would testify. Tomorrow, the case against Richard Chen would shift from white-collar crime to murder. Tomorrow, Sarah would learn the truth. And somewhere in Chicago, Richard Chen was having dinner, probably still confident that his lawyers could handle this, that his money and connections would protect him, that he'd survived investigations before, and would survive this one too. He had no idea what was coming. Dr. Kowalski's testimony. Evidence of premeditated murder. The final piece of the puzzle that would destroy him. I picked up the folder of my father's letters that Martinez had left with me. Read them again for the 10th or 20th time. One last chance to save him from himself. My father had failed to save Richard. But maybe he'd succeeded in giving me the tools to stop him. The evidence I'd collected, the testimony I'd provide, the operational review that documented everything. Tomorrow, that evidence would be joined by proof of murder. And Richard Chen's empire, built on 30 years of crime and corruption and death, would finally fall. Dr. James Kowalski looked like a man who'd already died and was just waiting for his body to catch up with the fact. He sat across from Martinez in the FBI field office interview room, his suit hanging loose on a frame that had probably been robust once. His skin had that grayish pallor of the terminally ill, but his eyes were clear, determined. The eyes of a man who'd made peace with his mortality and decided to spend his remaining days fixing his mistakes. I watched through the one-way glass, Nicole beside me, both of us silent as Martinez began the interview. Dr. Kowalski, thank you for coming in. I know this isn't easy. Nothing about the last 14 years has been easy, Agent Martinez. His voice was raspy but steady. I should have come forward when it happened, but I was a coward. And now I'm dying, and I'd like to die having told at least one truth. Martinez opened a file folder. Tell me about March 2016. About Richard Chen's request. Kowalski took a breath. That seemed to hurt. Richard had been my patient for 8 years by then. Routine physicals, minor ailments, nothing unusual. But in March 2016, he came to my office with an unusual request. He said he was working on a research project, medical ethics, end-of-life care, something academic. He wanted to understand various substances that could cause cardiac arrest. Specifically, he wanted to know about potassium chloride. What did you tell him? I explained that potassium chloride in high doses can trigger fatal arrhythmia, that it's sometimes used in lethal injection protocols, that in someone with a pre-existing heart condition, even a smaller dose could be catastrophic, and that it's virtually undetectable post-mortem unless you're specifically looking for it within a very narrow time window. Nicole's hand found mine. I squeezed it. And then what happened? Martinez asked. He asked if I could provide him with pharmaceutical-grade potassium chloride. Said it was for his research. I should have said no. Should have asked more questions. But Richard Chen was one of my most prominent clients. He paid well, referred other wealthy patients. And he had a way of making you feel like refusing him meant you were being unreasonable. So you provided it. 5 vials. Enough to kill several people if administered correctly. I documented it in my personal records, but kept it out of Richard's official medical file at his request. He said he didn't want his insurance company asking questions about unusual prescriptions. Martinez pulled out a photograph. Even through the glass, I could see it clearly. A young woman with dark hair and Nicole's eyes. Do you recognize this woman? Kowalski's face crumpled. Yes. I saw her photograph in the newspaper. Lily Barrett. Died of cardiac arrest in April 2016. 1 month after I gave Richard the potassium chloride. Did you suspect? Of course I suspected. Kowalski's composure broke. A healthy 34-year-old woman with a manageable heart condition dies suddenly of cardiac arrest weeks after I provide her former lover with the exact substance that could cause that? I'm not stupid, Agent Martinez. I knew what I'd done. I knew what Richard had done. And I did nothing. Why? Fear, guilt, self-preservation. All the reasons cowards stay silent. He wiped his eyes with a shaking hand. I told myself I had no proof, that it could have been coincidence. That if I came forward, Richard's lawyers would destroy me. I had a practice, a reputation, a daughter who was proud of me, and I let a murderer go free to protect all of that. What changed? Martinez asked gently. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Maybe 3 months left if I'm lucky. And last month, Richard attended my daughter's engagement party, shook her hand, congratulated her, acted like a benevolent businessman supporting his physician's family. And I realized I've spent 14 years protecting a man who killed someone's daughter, someone's mother. He looked toward the glass, as if he could see us watching. I can't take that into the grave with me. Martinez slid several documents across the table. These are your personal medical records, the ones documenting Richard's request and your provision of the potassium chloride. Are you willing to testify to this in court? Yes. You understand that testifying could expose you to criminal liability, that you could be charged as an accessory. I don't care. I'm dying anyway, and I'd rather die in prison having told the truth than die free having stayed silent. Kowalski's voice was firm now. Richard Chen killed that woman. I gave him the means to do it. The least I can do is make sure everyone knows. Martinez nodded slowly. Dr. Kowalski, Based on this testimony, I'm going to recommend that the U.S. Attorney's Office file murder charges against Richard Chen in the death of Lily Barrett. Your cooperation and testimony will be central to that case. Do you understand the implications? I do. Then I need you to sign this statement, acknowledging that everything you've told me today is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge. Kowalski signed without hesitation. His hand shook, but his signature was clear. When the interview ended, Martinez came out to the observation room. She looked at Nicole first. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry you had to wait 8 years to hear someone finally tell the truth about your mother." Nicole's face was wet with tears. "Can you use this? Can you make it stick?" "Yes." Between Dr. Kowalski's testimony, the medical records, the timeline, and the motive, we can prove Richard Chen murdered your mother. The U.S. Attorney is filing charges this afternoon. "What about me?" I asked. "My father. If Richard killed Nicole's mother with potassium chloride, did he?" "We don't know," Martinez said carefully. "The scaffolding collapse is different, more complicated. We're still investigating. But this," she gestured toward the interview room where Dr. Art Kowalski sat, exhausted and relieved. "This is solid. This we can prove." My phone finally returned to me under strict supervision, buzzed. A news alert. Breaking federal prosecutors to file murder charges against Richard Chen in 2016. Death. It was happening. After 8 years of Nicole's investigation, after my father's death, after everything, Richard Chen was finally being charged with murder. "What happens now?" Nicole asked. "Now we arrest him. Grand jury has already been convened. They'll indict within hours. Richard will be taken into custody, arraigned, and held without bail, given flight risk, and the severity of the charges." "When?" Martinez checked her watch. "Federal marshals are moving on his location as we speak. Should be in custody within the hour." I thought about Richard, probably in his office or his penthouse, probably still thinking his lawyers could make this all go away, probably still confident that his money and connections would protect him. He was about to learn otherwise. My phone buzzed again. "Sarah? Daniel? Please. I just saw the news. Murder charges? This can't be real. Please tell me you know this is insane. Please." I stared at the message. My wife, watching her father's empire collapse in real time, still not understanding what he really was. "You should respond," Nicole said quietly. "Tell her the truth." I typed slowly. "Your father killed Nicole's mother. He ordered potassium chloride from his personal physician and used it to trigger a fatal heart attack. There's documentation, testimony, proof. I'm sorry, Sarah, but it's real." I hit send before I could reconsider. 3 dots appeared immediately. Sarah typing, then stopping, then typing again, then nothing. The dots disappeared. No response came. "The marshals have him," Martinez said, checking her phone. "Richard Chen is in federal custody. He's being transported to the Metropolitan Correctional Center for processing." Through the observation room window, I could see Dr. Kowalski being escorted out by agents. He moved slowly, painfully, but his shoulders were straighter than when he'd arrived. The weight of 14 years of silence lifted. "What happens to him?" I asked. "Dr. Kowalski?" I was weak. "Don't plea deal." "Probably. His cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He won't see prison. He'll be dead before trial. But he'll die having done the right thing. Sometimes that's the best any of us can hope for." Nicole was crying again, but differently now. Not grief, relief. 8 years of carrying her mother's murder alone. And finally, someone believed her. Someone was doing something about it. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty interview room. To Dr. Kowalski, who couldn't hear her. To the FBI agents who'd listened. To the universe for finally, belatedly, delivering something like justice. My phone buzzed one more time. Sarah, I'm coming to find you. I don't care what the FBI says. We need to talk, face to face. This isn't over. Martinez saw my expression. What is it? Sarah. She says she's coming to find me, that we need to talk. She doesn't know where you are, and she won't. You're staying in protective custody until Richard's trial. That's non-negotiable. But something in Sarah's message made me uneasy. The certainty, the determination. Sarah had her father's intelligence, his resourcefulness, his unwillingness to accept defeat. And unlike Richard, she still thought I was someone worth saving. That made her dangerous in a completely different way. Outside the FBI field office, the Chicago afternoon stretched cold and bright. Somewhere in the city, federal marshals were processing Richard Chen into the system. Somewhere else, Sarah was making plans I didn't understand yet. And in this observation room, Nicole and I stood together, two people whose parents had been murdered by the same man who'd found each other by accident in a bus station on New Year's Eve, who'd built a case that finally was bringing that man to justice. One more chapter, Nicole said. I looked at her. What? The trial. Richard's conviction. That's the final chapter. The ending we've been working toward. But looking at Sarah's message, at the determination in those words, I wasn't sure the story was ending. I was starting to think it might just be beginning. 6 months later, I stood in a courtroom and watched Richard Chen be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge's voice was measured, clinical. Multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, money laundering, fraud. The defendant has shown a pattern of criminal behavior spanning 3 decades, resulting in the deaths of at least 4 individuals and the financial ruin of countless others. Richard didn't look at me, didn't look at Sarah, who sat 3 rows behind the prosecution, her face a mask of carefully maintained composure. He stared straight ahead as the bailiffs led him away, his expensive suit replaced with prison orange, his empire reduced to ashes and indictments. Nicole squeezed my hand. We'd sat through 6 weeks of trial together, listening to testimony, watching evidence be presented, seeing the careful documentation we'd compiled transform into irrefutable proof. Dr. Kowalski had died 2 weeks before trial began, but his deposition played on screens for the jury. Every word counted. The defense had tried everything. Discredited witnesses, challenged evidence, painted my father as paranoid and me as vengeful. Richard's lawyers had been expensive and vicious, but the truth was more vicious. Sarah waited for me outside the courthouse. 6 months since I'd seen her face to face. She looked thinner, older, like she'd aged years in months. Daniel, she said. Sarah, I wanted to say. She stopped, started again. I didn't know about any of it. I know you don't believe me, but I believe you, I said quietly. I believe you loved your father and trusted him, and never looked closely enough to see what he really was. I believe you thought firing me was mercy. I believe all of it. Her eyes filled with tears. Then why? Because belief isn't forgiveness. Because your father killed mine, killed Nicole's mother, killed people who deserved better, and you chose him over the truth until you had no choice left. I chose wrong, she whispered. I know that now. I know you do. We stood in the summer sunlight. 2 people who'd loved each other in another life, in another version of this story where fathers weren't monsters and marriages weren't casualties of truth. I filed for divorce, Sarah said. The papers should reach you soon. Okay, I'm sorry. For everything. Me too. She walked away. I watched her go shoulders straight, head high, still trying to maintain dignity in the wreckage. She'd lost her father, her marriage, her comfortable illusions. But she was still standing. Maybe that was something. Nicole and I walked to her car. In the trunk, our bags, packed, 2 tickets to Denver, where Nicole's mother was buried. We'd visit the grave together, tell her that justice had finally arrived. Then we'd figure out what came next, who we were when vengeance wasn't driving us forward. The sky above Chicago was impossibly blue, clean, like the world had been washed new while we weren't looking. "You okay?" Nicole asked. I thought about my father, about the letters he'd written trying to save a friend who couldn't be saved, about the 13 years I'd spent working for his killer without knowing it, about everything that had been lost and everything that had been found in the wreckage. "Ask me tomorrow," I said. She smiled, started the engine. We drove toward the future, leaving Richard Chen and his empire in the past where they belonged.